Hello folks, before we get into this week's episode, just wanted to let you know Bally's audio file for part 1 of the show went a bit haywire, so there's some skipping in it. I am going to do my best to try and make it readable, like this is a book or something, listenable I should say, so just hopefully bear with us for that first segment. It shouldn't be too bad, but there may be some weird random skips that occur when Bally is speaking. But otherwise, hopefully it's a good show. We enjoyed recording it. It's a long one, so sit back, relax, and hopefully enjoy. Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 158. Did you hear that? Hear that? The bells are ringing, the snow is a-falling, the season is upon us.
It's raining here.
I guess so. It's not really that wet down in London yet, but yeah, the season is here. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's December, which means that video games have stopped, and now it's time to talk about the best video games. I am Nbz, as I probably already said. I don't remember if I said that. I'm joined by Bally, my fellow Christmas happy elf. I don't know. How are you doing, Bally?
I'm doing well. If you had to pick, gun to your head.
Okay.
Do you prefer Game of the Year or E3?
Oh man, I like both for different reasons, right?
Game of the Year is always more consistent, I find. E3 is either like, that was awesome, or you come away from it thinking, yeah, there was some cool stuff, but I probably enjoyed Game of the Year more that year. Or, you know, like it's quite up and down. It
depends, right? Because you know, there's lots of different places I listen to Game of the Year stuff from. Like GameSpot have a new podcast called After Dark, which they started recently that I've been listening to, and they just put out a podcast which was all of their personal top 10 games of the year. And I like stuff like that, you know, like what we do as well. So there is an interesting thing about Game of the Year for me as well, is like there'll be years where, like, I remember the year when Her Story came out and like Undertale came out. Like, it was 2015, I think, the end of that year. And then in the Steam sale, I picked up a bunch of games I heard people talk about or like read about during Game of the Year. So it's a really good time to get yourself up to speed on stuff that you may have missed and be like, oh, that should be on my radar for in the future. So yeah, I like that about it. It's real cool. I mean, you know, nothing can really best the announcements of E3, but the Game Awards does try. Like, it does a good job sometimes. Most of the stuff isn't for us, but Nintendo's always guaranteed to have something, so we get something at least.
Yeah, and then PlayStation just announced their I can't even remember the name of their direct. What they call it?
State of Play.
State of Play. That's on just before the Game Awards, right?
It's very telling that like websites still say, "Hey, PlayStation's doing another one of those Nintendo Direct things they do." Like I saw Eurogamer being like, "PlayStation's doing a Nintendo Direct again," and it's like, well. Yep, so Sony have just done a poor job. Like, you can, I mean, look, listeners know you don't remember any names of anything, but still, the point stands that people...
It's the PlayStation Direct.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
They need to do a better job around marketing that stuff and figuring out what it actually is and, like, what to deliver it with.
We've talked about a lot of other podcasts and outlets. December plan. Biggest, boldest December yet for This Nintendo Life.
This is what happens is when you get two Star Wars fans who are also video game people in December, and it's like, oh dear, there's too much stuff to talk about.
It's a lot. So, in the month of December, we have 6 podcasts coming out. That's 6 podcasts. That's the most we've ever done in a single month. So, this current podcast that you are listening to is Game of the Year Part 1. This podcast will come out on December the 9th. We then have podcasts coming out on December the 16th. They will be non-Nintendo Game of the Year. That's our Patreon exclusive show on TNL Ranks for $2. December the 16th will also be our Jedi Fallen Order spoiler cast. I need to be at that game for that deadline. I'm on it. December the 21st will be 23rd Game of the Year Part 2. So that's going to be our top 10 Nintendo games that came out on Nintendo systems this year. We did decide we're going to go for a top 10 list this time, just because I think our total number is at something like 19.
You say we decide. Basically, Bally bullied me into doing this.
I thought that because we played about, I think the number's something like 19 to 20 games or something, that bringing that to a top 5, I think my argument was there
would have been savage though. You want the tears, you want the hard times.
I wanted it to be slightly less savage and more 6 to 10 because I think there's some solid games that'll come 6 to 10. But anyway, that's December 23rd for Game of the Year Part 2. December the 25th, Nbz has been working on a very impressive project. He's done his top 100 games of all time across 10 different videos in the last few months. And so Nbz decided we're going to stick that in a podcast format and put it out on the show for
why not?
as a Christmas present on December the 25th.
Yeah, Christmas present for everyone on Christmas Day. I think the final runtime on that podcast is 3 hours and 31 minutes. So yeah, enjoy that, I guess. My 100 favorite games ever. It's a thing.
And then our final December show will be on December the 30th. Is the Mandalorian spoiler. We are in the middle of that series right now. I think it finishes around the same time episode 9 comes out, but we will have that spoiler cast out on December the 30th. If that was a lot of dates to throw at you, you can find them on our Twitter account at TNL Podcast. And Nbz made a lovely graphic with those 6 dates for you if you want to know when each episode comes out, so you won't miss it over this holiday season.
Look, I'll take any excuse to use the Zelda font. It's a good font. I like it.
It's a great font.
So yeah, go check that out on our Twitter feed. It gives you dates for everything that you can be on the lookout for. Fun stuff. Okay, well, with that out of the way, Bally, do you want to tell us what we're talking about in this very show, this episode?
This episode, first segment, we have the games that we have been playing. Second segment, we're going to be talking about the games of the year that didn't come out this year that you have sent in to us. And then our third segment, we're going to be talking about the games of the year that we come out this year, our own personal top 10 lists, as we do. This is the first pillar of our game of the year, triple whammy.
Oh yeah, it's a good triple whammy. Enjoy it. So yeah, we'll just go back and forth 10 to 1 and count them down. It'll be fun. It's an interesting year, I think. I always say this, but I feel like there's lots of weird games in my list. I think like the back half of the year tends to be a lot of new stuff, and so a lot of this stuff is from earlier, but definitely good stuff to talk about. So we'll get into it, but let's kick things off with video games we've been playing. And I'm going to start this time because they recently finally brought a game back from the dead, because it seemed like, okay, here's the thing, right? We have a lot of discussion about Mario Maker. We did our top 50 recently where we took the Wii U version over the Switch version because I think impact was important for that game, and also we feel like, there are certain things about Mario Maker 2 that have been a bit frustrating, and certainly Nintendo have not done a good job of supporting this game. It came out, 6 months ago now, in July, or was it June? I think it was June. It was around E3 time. And since then, it's pretty much been radio silence. Like, they haven't updated it at all, haven't really added too much. They did sneakily throw in the Friends multiplayer. Remember, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Bally and I actually played some of that. We never talked about it on the show. It didn't really warrant talking about on the show, I think. Right? We had like a bad experience with it, generally.
Yeah, it just kind of like we struggled to find really solid, unbreakable levels that felt substantial and fulfilling, I guess.
And like some of the checkpointing was weird because we hit checkpoint flags, and then if we failed the level, it would just reset us back to the beginning of the level with a new timer. It wouldn't respawn us at checkpoints if we just died and lost all our lives or whatever. So I don't really know how it's built. Like it's just built really weirdly, the multiplayer in Mario Maker generally, and it was laggy in some matches as well. It didn't really perform too well, but essentially aside from that, there's been nothing. So it was kind of surprising when Nintendo was like, oh, here's a big update, and we've added Pokies, and here's some new items, and now you can play as Link in the Super Mario Brothers engine in that theme. And so I was like, oh shit, okay, well, this is the first thing that has given me any interest in returning to Super Mario Maker 2, because I hadn't much reason. I think for me, obviously, and we talked about this at the time, is without the community, without people playing it, it's not as fun, right? Like, you want to be able to put your level out there and be like, oh, 200 people played this and I got 40 likes on it and stuff like that. And that just doesn't happen when no one's playing the game anymore, right? Like, everyone's kind of moved on. And I think there is a community around it, but it's not large enough to sustain, people putting out all these levels into the world. It's just going to get bogged down. So for me, it was just like, oh, it's an excuse to get back in. it's a good time now because it means a lot more people will be playing because of the update. So it's more likely that people will play a level I make. So that's kind of what I did. And I decided I was going to make a little level with Link, use some of the mechanics. He's really interesting because this isn't just a skin. It's not just an amiibo costume. He's full on a different character in terms of he has a sword, he has the Pegasus boots, he has a bomb, he has bow and arrow, he does a down stab, which I initially wanted to make a level that was based around like pogo sticking, like DuckTales with the down stab, but it turns out the down stab doesn't really like boing you off things. It's more of a
just cut through everything that just like down stab right through them, right?
Well, my entire idea for the original level was like have a bunch of pokies like over gaps and like bounce on the pokies to get through, etc. Which I discovered very quickly I could not do, so I had to come up with something else. But yeah, I threw together a small level. Bally, you just played it this morning. What do you think of Link and his addition to the game? And do you think that this could set a precedent for them to add Samus to the game and like have her own unique moveset?
Yeah, I think it does open up a lot of options as to what you can do. The idea, like before, Mario can only essentially shoot the fireballs, and they obviously go in a very specific direction that's we know, and the fireballs haven't traditionally set off a ton in like Mario Maker levels, and obviously they can do like the bombs and that can set off chaining reactions, but actually just having a bow you can fire at so many different angles and you can jump and then shoot it. It feels really flexible. The same with the bombs that Link can throw himself. Like, I think it opens up a really crazy kind of can of worms as to where this could go if it was something they chose to pursue. But would they do it through DLC, or are we talking like Mario Maker 3 down the line? Like, it's a bit...
No, I feel like they need to keep some more momentum with this game, and it needs more than what they've given it so far. It needs another big update. And right, here's the question, because forever we were speculating, there's another mode, there's another theme that they can add, because they, in the menu, have just 3D World under that section, but the way it's worded is in plural, so we imagine people are like, is it going to be Mario 2? Is it going to be Land or something?
It's going to be Super Metroid.
Right. Yeah, that would be a thing. But that, to me, that is the most likely scenario for DLC, for paid DLC, right? Is like a brand new theme that has new course parts and all this different stuff. The only worry I have is that completely fractures the user base. Unless they do a thing where it's only if you want to make levels with those parts, then you can get them. But anyone can play them, right? Like, anyone can play that type of level.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's really cool. I think that little trailer that they just put out, and it's like, oh, that's cool. They're adding new stuff. And then I think seeing the Master Sword and seeing all the abilities that Link has just kind of brought it to a whole other level of, like, creativity. And it's that Nintendo twist in the tail that they put into loads of things that you just think, oh, I never thought of that. That's awesome. Like the Link's Awakening remake, that review-wise, no one seemed to really catch on to that. Like, it just fell flat on its face for a number of I'm not saying it's impossible to make a good Zelda maker. I think they just did it in a way that wasn't great.
It was a really poor implementation. It wasn't fun. It didn't, it didn't
really
make sense. So yeah, this is definitely a step in that direction. And yeah, it's good to be playing Mario Maker again. I went on Twitch and I found like a streamer with 3 viewers again and was like, hey, play my level. And they did, and it was fun to just watch that happen. So
that is cool.
Thankfully, there are still enough people streaming Mario Maker on Twitch to where you can feasibly do that. I don't think that would have been the case with the Wii U one back in the day. So at least it's more successful on that level, which is good to see. But yeah, so I will probably jump back in and make some more levels, maybe work on a more complicated one with some of these new parts with Pokey, and there's some other stuff they added, which I can't remember now, like the P blocks, I think, where you hit the P switch and the block changes on and off. I included that in the level. So a few different things to mess around with. You can put coins in ice. So that's a fun idea of like a level where you have to burn things away with a fireball. So yeah, I'll continue with that. Bally, let's jump over to you now, because you have just played this morning a game that a lot of people hold in very high regard. But before Bally talks about that, he talks about Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah. podcast when I actually beat that game. I guess maybe 2/3 of the way, just past.
Just briefly, what do you think of the story development so far? Are you still positive on the game and in the combat? And
I was already in, but I'm even more in. Like, it's getting better. It's a build where, and I know you didn't enjoy the first few hours really at all. Now it's just even better than it was. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, this morning I played a game I've been meaning to play it a long time, and it was on my list when I picked up a PS4, and that game came out back in 2012 originally on the PS3 is Journey. Bally, this is like one of the best single sitting games like ever. Is it spoilers if you tell us where it ranked in your top 100?
I don't know. It's like it's on the list, so you'll hear it. Yeah,
it's already out. It's on the list, which I think says a lot, and it's a really cool game. Transcendence. Like, there's a real emphasis on heaven and ethereal things at the top of a mountain, and
it's an analogy, it's a metaphor, definitely. It's a journey, yeah, exactly. 100%.
With no arms, a scarf, and a cloak, and so you start in a desert, and the aim effect bong, which kind of, it does a number of things in the game. It can alert other people, because you can kind of go on this journey with other people who are these other smaller scarves and things in the game that essentially, when you alert them they like light up your own scarf, and when your own scarf is lit up, you can jump. So your two abilities are to bong and jump.
I like how you're using the word bong because I feel like that word is used for different purposes. It's like a beeping, like it's like a chirp. I would call it a chirp, right? Like it's kind of like a birdie
chirp, but it's a low sound, so it has to be like a bong.
Sure, okay.
Bong.
Okay, great.
If you hit a gong, what sound does it make? A bong.
Sure, okay, yeah, okay.
Anyway,
right.
So to make these little small scarves, like kind of light up your own scarf, and then you're essentially more or less a puzzle platform. But like the world is very open, but at the same time, what I love is that it's so open, but ultimately it's very linear. Like it's very linear while feeling open.
Yeah. Like, it has that sense of real depth to the environments and just gorgeous landscapes. Like, especially when you start out in the desert and you feel like, oh man, I can kind of go all over the place here. And did you find... So this is the core question I have about playing Journey at the end of 2019. Like, this is a game that originally came out in 2012 on PS3. I played it pretty close to launch. I played it maybe, a few weeks after it came out. And obviously it came out on PS4 later. This game is very centered around this multiplayer that isn't really multiplayer. It's you encounter other people, but there's not really any way to communicate with them other than the little chirp you can do. Did you go through a journey with another player for the whole time, or were you mixing with different players as they came in and out? How was that aspect of it for you?
Right. And I hadn't realized, but when you do your bong, you do like you light up a little symbol, and each person's symbol is unique. So I hadn't noticed, because I was on the journey. By the end of the game, it told me I'd gone on it with 3. I didn't realize it was 3 different people. I thought it was just maybe one person who was catching me up, overtaking me, doing whatever. But it was actually 3 different ones. Everyone has a unique symbol. I just hadn't noticed at the time. So yeah, I did. I maybe played through about 40% of the game with someone by my side, and it was kind of cool. I wouldn't say it was... It sounds like it was more impactful for you, certainly, than it was for me.
Oh, definitely. I think at the time it was definitely a really unique thing, and it felt like you were helping each other or discovering. Like, I remember the first person I ran into, they were just like going over the hill and they kept chirping at me, and I was like, okay, let's follow in this direction. And they led me to this secret area that I would not have found on my own. Like, there's definitely no way I would have gone out of my own kind of direction. And it was like this ruined place, and there was like a thing inside it, and there was a secret that you could extend your scarf with. And clearly this was someone who had already played the game and was like, hey, I know this thing over here, come follow me and I'll help you out. And that happened multiple times with different people. I think the one person I spent the most time with, who at the end, this is like the saddest fucking thing for me, but I think my internet died right at the end of the game. And so like that person, and it actually, like, the way the story goes, it is actually kind of perfect, because it's like at a moment where someone disappearing and you being more alone would make more sense. So it kind of fed into that to some degree. But they literally, like, right near the end, they just, like, disappeared. And I was like, oh, man. Like, and that's part of my story with Journey, is a moment like that happening.
Yeah. No, I think it's just an incredibly impactful, like, game. And I think the signposting is some of the best I've really seen, like, in terms of having an area that's so open, but then to say, all right, that's where I need to go, and this leads to that, and like, it is so clear. It's a very easy game. Like, I love how clear it is, and the constant changing environments. Like, it all constantly feels so. Never anything that's overly repeated. The game's so short that, like, it'd be hard to repeat something. Well, it wouldn't be hard to repeat something, but it's nice that they mix it up so much, and I think it's got a real, like when you have an easy finish that's a victory lap, like it's got a nice victory lap end. Like, I think it's just unbelievably cool, like what it does.
It's just gorgeous as well. Like, it is an absolutely stunning game, and like, it looks great on PlayStation 3, but I think it's the PS4 version now runs at 60, and like, I booted it up because some of my friends at uni were like, oh, I had my PS4 out, and I was like, you should play this. And like, for general people who aren't really into video games, I don't think they get, like, they started playing it and they weren't really like, let's play GTA, and I was like, okay, fine, GTA 5.
Nice
like, I feel like you have to have a certain sensibility and an appreciation for the art form of games to play something like Journey.
I mean, I don't think your average gamer who's, average gamer is such a vague term, but you have gamers into COD and GTA, whatever, and I don't think they're keen on sitting, no voice acting for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Like, it is a commitment.
It's almost the first walking simulator to some degree, right? Like, there's not a lot you do outside of just moving from space to space, but like, the moment that they score with music and some of the cinematography that they create,
the reveals of new areas and the build up, it's incredibly well done.
Or like, there's the moment that they show in a lot of the trailers, which is just this gorgeous, like, archways on, like, behind you, and you're sliding down the sand as you see the archways and the sun is like cracking through. Just the composition on that stuff is astonishingly good.
What was I going to say? I think I was going to say, I love how the game almost forces you to play. It does this in a number of ways. I think, first of all, it says, like, when it loads up, it says begin your journey. Like, it doesn't say load or continue, or it's just begin your journey. And so you play through the game, and then so I was just like, oh, I need to go to the loo. So I tried hitting pause. No, the game doesn't pause. Like,
interesting.
Your character just sits down and meditates. And like, sure, you can go away and come back, but unless you're like, hard pausing using the PS4 home button, like, you are in the game, but you're just meditating on the spot. And then again, when you beat the game, the credits roll, and then it just journey. Like, there's no other part of the game. Like, there's no other modes. There's no menus. Well, there's nothing more to it than that. This game is designed that you begin your journey, you end your journey, and that's the game. Like, and I love how bold it is in that statement. And I actually wish there were just more singles that were just a beginning, middle, and end kind of. And there's not like a story in a traditional sense. It's very much, and it's not even hinting at a story in the same way like a game like Inside would, in my view. Like,
I mean, like, there is a sense you go to those I don't know what you call them, where you sit down and you get a little bit of a cutscene where it shows not hieroglyphics but like a mural of some people. Sure. Yeah, like I feel like there's an internet, like on YouTube, there'll be a YouTube channel out there that's like explaining the lore of Journey and what really happened in the past or whatever, stuff like that. So like, that's probably there, but...
And there's a real like combination of traditional themes running through Journey. Like, there are parts that feel very much like Middle Eastern, Egyptian, like these dead. At the same time, near the end, it's very much Japanese, and like shrines. Like, the idea of like these man-made shrines in and amongst a visually stunning, like, that this game definitely has a lot more later in the game, I would argue. But yeah, 1984 setting that Inside is going for, and it's like, what does this mean? What does this do? And it's building questions in your mind. Whereas, as much as Journey does have a beginning, a middle, and the end. I don't think the game is... I like that because there's not like a big answer at the end or anything. You get to the end, and that's the end. And then again, like, it's begin your journey. And like, I love that. It's not... would have... Unless they, you know, hit it out of the park, I feel like it might have weighed down on what the game was going, what they went for with this game.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, right? Because Journey has fostered this community around it where there are people who just play this game constantly and they act as shepherds. They act as people who, when someone new is playing the game, they will go through the game with them and like help them through and show them things. And I think when you get all the trophies or something like that, or when you get all the scarf pieces, you get this really long white scarf. And so when you basically, if you were to play this game again, you would start it with the same length of cloth that you had, I think, by the end of the game. So you have the ability to go places or help people go places much more easily. And so, yeah, a lot of these people will have the white outfit on and the white scarf, and they will, I don't know if you saw any of the people on your journey were like that or had that with them.
I think they looked like me for the most part. I can remember.
Okay. So it was probably newer players you were playing alongside. I imagine, well, I think the thing is, because this game is on sale on the PSN right now, there's probably a lot of new players jumping in.
That makes sense, yeah, of course.
But yeah, I think because the multiplayer, there's no voice chat, there's no text chat, the interaction you can have is only positive. Like, there's only positive interactivity you can do in this game. And as a result, it just flips that switch in terms of the negativity that people have around online multiplayer, which I think is just such a brilliant choice.
They could turn Twitter into a single bong for a day.
I think you could take that in different ways, sure. But yes.
Yeah. But this is the sort of game that I would love to just play like every year. Like, say every December, every Christmas time. I'm just going to play this once a year. Like, it really left that with me where I want to experience this again, like, down the line and come back to it. And yeah, and this is the game I know you tried with what you said about your GTA story, and I totally try to get people into games using this game. And you're right, maybe you do have to have played more story-driven, narrative-driven things to appreciate this fully, but it really made an impact. And I know I had high expectations for this game, the amount you'd been talking about, the amount loads of people have been talking about this, and it's a game that's kind of, because it came out such a long time ago, and I think it was re-released 15, like, that's still a while ago, and like, there's been so many incredible games since then that it's easy to forget about what I would argue is like a proper PlayStation classic. Like, this game is really up there in my mind. So yeah, definitely top marks for Journey. Great.
Yeah, it's interesting you say you want to play it again, because for me, I have that one experience, that one journey that I made, and that's it. I never want to play Journey again. You know, like, that is my memory of that game, and I want to have that forever and just leave it at that. But I certainly see the case, because as we mentioned, like, there are people who just keep playing through this game, and it's, you know, it's just, as Nintendo Cadbury Sun would say, it's a nice place. I'd sleep there, you know, like, it's a nice world to exist in.
I like the online multiplayer aspect, and I know that's been a big impact for you, but like, for me, it was cool, it was fine. I think I would have had almost as a good time without it personally, but yeah. Anyway, NBZ, what else have you been playing?
So sales were happening, and we're getting to the end of the year, and we're like, okay, let's catch up on some things, make sure that we're ready to talk about them. And a game that you played earlier this year is Cadence of Hyrule. And as a result of getting digital copies of Sword and Shield, or just Sword, and Luigi's Mansion 3, I had like £8 of money and gold points. So I was like, well,
wow,
this is pretty good. And then Cadence of Hyrule.
Gotta go digital.
Yeah, Cadence of Hyrule was like 50 something, or like 40% off. I don't know. It was £15, and then I had the £8, so I got it for basically £7, which is a game that came out this year for like 22 something. So felt pretty good about that. And yeah, so this is from Brace Yourself Games, who made Crypt of the Necrodancer, kind of an indie darling from a few years ago, that is a roguelike dungeon crawler, but is all about music and moving to the beat. And so you play as Link or Zelda in Hyrule, and you are moving to the beat through different screens and into different dungeons. And people said this was a roguelike, but I kind of I'm not sure it really is. Like, there are elements of it that are rogue, in the sense that items that you collect can just disappear. So the shovel or the torch, if you get...
But they're very easy to collect, aren't they? They're not like... You don't feel overly penalized when you die.
Yes. And the game kind of just gives them to you as soon as you respawn. You know, like it's very easy to just get access to those things again. And also, one of the weird things is you can pick up really good weapons that are called glass weapons, and they just disappear after you get hit once. And this game is pretty hard. Like, I had a hard time with this game. I think I found it maybe a bit more tricky than you, for whatever reason.
I had a weird curve where the game, and by the end I just found it too easy. And we should say, I played as Zelda, you played as Link, so I think fundamentally Zelda is probably better just because of her range. Like, I think she's a much safer character to play as.
Sure, maybe to some degree, but like... There are situations, because if you're shooting her fireball, like Din's fire, you are just standing still, so you are a bit open in that sense. But you can definitely have spacing to where you can kind of cheese it, and you can be a bit safer, and you can turtle a bit more, I guess. Whereas for me with Link, it was like, I'm just up close and personal all the time, and you get into these scenarios where there's like fucking 6 different types of enemies, and some of them will like hit you from this direction. You've got to make sure you're making the right decisions about where you're moving to, and it gets really tough. It gets very tricky. But yeah, what I was saying about the glass weapons is they give you these weapons, and then you get hit once and they break, and it's like they're just gone. So even those within a playthrough can just disappear as easily as you get them. And it's weird, right? Because this game is, in a sense, a Zelda game. It has an overworld, it has dungeons, and you go into the dungeons, you collect the musical instruments, and then you fight the final boss, you go to Hyrule Castle. But it's not really a Zelda game.
It's really not, is it? Yeah.
No. Well, it is. It's a rhythm game, and it's a not platformer. It's an action rhythm game, but also it's weird because they give you all the Zelda items, and I never used any of them, right? They gave me the boomerang and the bow and arrow and all these things. I think it's because so much of my brain space is taken up by being on beat and making sure I know where I'm moving, where I'm hitting with my sword. If I have a certain sword that hits in an arc or one that hits 2 spaces away, I need to be always cognizant of that stuff. And because my mind was so focused on just making sure I'm not missing beats, making sure I'm not taking damage, that my brain didn't have enough space to also think, what if I used a freeze spell? Or what if I threw out a boomerang here? Or what if I dropped a bomb here, right? There were moments where I did, like, bombs were probably the things I used the most.
Yeah, me too.
But outside of that, like, they give me the hook shot, I used it once, I think, and that was it for the entire game. Which is weird, because I think if you are trying to build a game that is trying to be a bit more of a Zelda game, you do need to design it to be a bit more like that. At least in the dungeons, have some rooms that are not enemy focused, maybe, and are more rhythm focused in a different way that's based around puzzles. So for example, what if you had a chest that like blinked back and forth, and you need to time it with the hookshot to get across a gap? Like, that would be a rhythm-based challenge, but it doesn't involve enemies within a dungeon. You see what I mean? But they don't really do that. Like, they only focus on having enemies within dungeons, and it's all randomized, right? So if you die, those rooms that you're going through will be rolled again, and they'll be a completely new thing. So everyone, when they load, they'll get a new seed, and they will get a random world to begin with. It's all the same pieces, right? Like, all of the squares are the same, but the actual composition of it, like where Kakariko Village is, where the Gerudo Valley is, all that stuff is completely different for whoever is playing the game. And what that meant was that I guess the composition I got, or maybe it was just I went in the wrong direction to begin with, but I died like 6 or 7 times really quickly in like the first 2 screens of this game, just getting used to it. And I think it is partially because they throw you in the deep end. They're like, okay, here's 4 different enemy types straight away. They don't really give you the time to learn, like, okay, we've got the crocodile guys who go forward and they'll keep going forward. This game is really about learning enemy patterns and knowing what their behavior is so that you can hit them and not get hurt by them. Yeah, so that's the situation, is that the game doesn't give you enough time to get acclimatized to how it works and how a lot of the enemies operate, which means that you are thrown into the deep end really quickly. But it does get easier, right? And I think a lot of why it gets easier is just heart containers, like giving you more health, which gives you more leeway to take hits.
Yeah, more powerful weapons, brutal you sort of, and you just keep going. And the more enemies you kill, the more hearts they drop. You can kind of...
Yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of one aspect I'm not a big fan of with this game, is that, like, balance wise, it just doesn't feel
totally
right. Like, I actually found some of the boss fights like the easiest parts of the whole game, and it's like, shouldn't they be a bit of a challenge? And
yeah, some of them were quite simple. I did like the design of the boss fights, though. There's the three-headed dragon who like shoots electricity out. Loved that fight. I thought that was a really interesting fight, and I had to do it a few times. It was kind of probably the sweet spot for me in terms of difficulty. But then you get to Octavo, and he's like, okay, I've got 4 instruments, and you need to deal with 4 phases of me doing these 4 enemies to hurt my health all the way down, and then the final phase is just like a big fuck you, I'm going to throw dark nuts at you and everything. And God, that boss drove me insane. It took me so many tries to beat him. And then, there's another one after that at the end, which I found much easier, which was pretty cool. There's a cool thing they do at the end, which I won't spoil. But yeah, it is a weird balance, because for so much of the start of the game I was just dying, and then I was like, okay, I found my groove, now I'm enjoying this. And man, the music is so good. Like, some of the remixes they do are fantastic, and like Family Jules, who we follow on YouTube, he did a lot of the music in this game. Weird funny connection for me is there was someone in the Pokemon community called Miklachu, Michaela. She plays the Otomome. It's like this weird instrument that is like a face, and like you squeeze it and some noise. She actually, funnily enough, she played in the Game Awards orchestra either last year or the year before.
Oh, wow.
With her Otomome, and I saw her playing in the crowd. So really weird throwback to Pokemon days. She's done very well for herself and is credited in a game now, and has played at the Game Awards. It's awesome. So that is, for me, the crown jewel at the center of Cadence of Hyrule is this soundtrack, which is fucking killer. Like, the version of Gerudo Valley is amazing, and I could listen to it nonstop forever. It is weird sometimes when you transition from screen to screen, because if you're moving environments, the music will shift. But the music shifts all the time, right? So if you're in a shop, the shopkeeper starts singing along his own version, or if you're in the pause menu, the version changes to a more subdued, laid-back version. It's constantly, it's this dynamic soundtrack, which is always catered to whatever you're doing at that particular moment, which I just thought was very cool, and I liked it a lot. And yeah, it's an enjoyable game. Like, I enjoyed my time with it. I think there are definitely moments of frustration, and I think that they could have done a better job of just like streamlining it to some degree. I just don't think you needed all these items in there. I don't think you needed to have these one-time use things, or
had rhythmical puzzles that didn't involve enemies, perhaps, or something like.
Yeah.
The dungeons could have been a bit more dungeon-like rather than just rooms full of enemies. Like, I think there's things that could have been done.
Yeah, the dungeons basically boil down to go down 2 floors, beat a mini-boss, and then we'll unlock the next area, do it again, and then you unlock the boss key. It's very linear. Like, it's not really exploration-based. I mean, there are floors where you have to explore to find the mini-boss to get the key to then go down the place, but that's kind of the same thing every time. Like, that is what you do every time, and it doesn't really change. So despite its randomness, it is kind of going through the motions to some degree. For me, the game got much better once I got a particular upgrade, which was my sword, instead of just hitting ahead of me, had a wide arc to it, which meant that I could basically stand one space away from an enemy in front of them, and it would slice them. It would basically hit 3 enemies in front of me. So if I'm standing on one square,
it's like the diagonal to you.
It's basically hitting them diagonally, which was much safer because you lose the risk of being hit if they're coming towards you. And there were multiple enemies where you could just stagger them, like the crocodile guys in particular. They just come at you in a straight line, whereas if you just come at them and you don't go in front of them, they'll just stand there and die. So you can just stand there with that sword and just whack, 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 dead. And there were choke points in dungeons often where there's this one corridor they're coming through, and I would just stand on the edge of that corridor and just whack, 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 and the people just come through and just die. That worked for a little while, then eventually the dungeons got a little bit more open, and so it was a bit trickier to kind of fluke my way through, or just to cheese my way through every time. But I feel like Cadence of Hyrule is a great idea that could have been executed a little bit better. But I do really appreciate that this collaboration happened, that Nintendo are willing to give their IP to a studio, like an independent studio. And also, like, it's gorgeous. The pixel art is so good. I would love a new 2D Zelda that looked like this, or like had any ounce of this style, because it's fantastic. One of the things that also surprised me is the opening and the ending of the game have voice acted cutscenes, and I was like, wait a second, what? Hello? It was a little weird. I didn't expect that from a game like this, but it was pretty neat to see that. And
my memory for some, I can't remember. It's not made a huge impact on me, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you just it probably speaks to how much you enjoyed it, maybe. And I remember you saying that you were like a bit bummed that it was quite short, like you went through it quite quickly and felt like probably could have been longer. I was fine with its length. Like, it took me 6 hours, I think, and I thought it was a good length for it.
Short, but I was kind of done when I reached the end, for sure.
Yeah, no, I get you. That makes sense. But yeah, like, I think it's definitely worth trying. It's not my type of game. Like, it's not a genre that I generally get into, but there is a real satisfaction to when you're in beat, right? Like, when you're really hitting the rhythm and you're not missing any of the notes, and you're just like boom, 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 and you kind of go into this weird headspace where you're just like your focus and your concentration and everything is like this part of you that, you know, is kind of distant, but you're almost systematically just doing it inherently. It's a weird thing to describe, but you kind of get into the zone, and when you're in the zone and you're nailing it, and like you're not taking damage and you're hitting every enemy and you're taking them down, it feels really good. It really does. So yeah, Cadence of Hyrule, cool game. That's pretty much it. And also, just a quick note, I've still been playing Pokemon. I've been playing some Pokemon Sword and Shield. I don't know why. I just want to catch everything, Bally. I want to get the Pokedex.
How big is the Pokedex post?
It's like 400, I think. So 400. It's over half. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I think the wild area has made it really easy. Also, I was telling you, basically, quick balls are just ridiculous in this game. You just fucking throw quick balls at anything, full health, no matter what, and most of the time you'll just catch it, which is great. And because of the way XP share works, and because of the fact that you get experience for catching things, I have simultaneously been leveling things up to evolve while also catching things. So I'm like on this double front of filling out the Pokedex. So I have a team of like a Ghastly and a Scrafty and a Baltoy and stuff, all like level 60. So they need to go up one level just to evolve themselves. And I'm just having them in my party while I roll around and catch a Noctowl or a Zartu or whatever. It's a lot of fun. It's just one of those games that you can just sit and chill with and have a podcast on. And I actually have been streaming a little bit as well. So I've got some people who've been sending me some things to trade as well, like starters I need and stuff like that. So it's nice to kind of be doing that stuff again. Don't think I'm going to do competitive on the game because they have a 20-minute timer for Wi-Fi, which is maybe the most boneheaded fucking decision Game Freak could have made. Like, they build this entire fucking game around making competitive as easy as possible, lowering the barrier of entry for just anyone to get into competitive, and then they're like, oh yeah, let's stick a 20-minute timer on the Wi-Fi battles. And it's like, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, what? Why? It is just ridiculous. It's like baking a fucking cake, and then at the end, before you present it to the judges, you smash your face into the cake. That's what it feels like to me. It is ridiculous. I can't get over what a boneheaded decision that is. But anyway, it's still fun. I'm still enjoying it. So great, we're going to take a break here. Don't worry, we'll be right back with some of your emails talking about some of your games of the year. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second segment of today's show. It's our first Game of the Year special, and that means we are talking about the games of the year that didn't actually come out this year. We've got our list coming up next segment, but this segment we're going to be talking through the list that you very kindly sent us. So thank you very much for that. I guess we should plug the email address, ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com, because next time we're going to be talking about the games that did come out this year. So give us your lists for the games that actually did come out this year for next time, if that makes sense. But anyway, NBZ, shall we go to the first email from Jackpot,
yes,
who gave us his list?
Absolutely. So Jackpot from Vancouver, BC, which you think means British Columbia.
I think.
Well, we'll see.
So
he says, hey guys, I somehow managed to complete 30 games so far this year. Very good. Jedi Fallen Order will be 31. So I thought I'd throw a quick list together for you both to have a chat about on the show. I've been a listener since episode 1 and always enjoy your content. You guys have literally been one of my biggest inspirations to start my own podcast, which I'm hoping will release early next year. And I'd like to say thank you for your dedication to the show. Thank you very much, Jackpot. I really appreciate that. And let us know how that podcast goes, and can give it a listen as well. So, the top 5 games that did not come out this year. Number 5, Overcooked 2. Number 4, Yakuza 0. Number 3, Shadow of the Colossus. Number 2, Super Mario RPG. And number 1, Persona 5. It's a solid list there.
A lot of games on there I need to play.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, Yakuza is the series that I keep saying, I need to play that. I will, because
you're going to do it?
Yeah, well, they announced that Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2 are all coming to Game Pass next year. So it's my decision made for me, I guess. It's just like it's
I get confused between Yakuza and Shenmue for some reason.
Well, it's very easy to get confused between them because Shenmue basically was the progenitor for Yakuza.
Okay.
Shenmue was made by Sega back in the day, and then Yakuza also made by Sega, kind of like spiritual successor, except Shenmue sucks and Yakuza is good. That's the difference that you need to know. Basically, ignore Shenmue and Yakuza is actually good. Yeah, Super Mario RPG, that's one we both have had kicking around on the Super Nintendo Classic for a while.
Yeah, I think it might make it to a Backlog Club poll or something, We'll get there. And I'm definitely going to play Shadow of the Colossus next year. I know that there's a good remake on PS4 for that. And I will get to Persona one day. Is there any easy way for me to play Persona 4? Because I know that's your favorite above 5, but 5 is like the more easy to access one, probably.
Yeah, it's not really a good way to play Persona unless you have a Vita. You could.
That's like one in a million.
You could. So what you could do is you could go and buy a Vita TV if they still exist. Sony probably discontinued them. Beep beep beep. Editing NBZ here. I called it a Vita TV, which is what they called it in Japan. In fact, Sony rebranded the device as the PlayStation TV in North America and Europe and places like that. Not that it mattered, because did anyone want to buy a Vita? I did. I bought one. Did anyone want to play those games on their TV? Maybe some people. Anyway, it's called a PlayStation TV over here. Minor thing that I just wanted to throw out there. Back to the show. Beep beep beep. The Vita TV was like a thing that you plugged into your TV that you could also put Vita games into to play it on your TV.
Switch before a Switch?
Not really, because it was a completely separate thing. It didn't connect to your Vita or anything. You just took the cartridge out of your Vita and put it into the Vita TV, and then...
Like a Game Boy Advance player?
Yeah, kind of. Basically, that's what it is. It's basically a standalone device to play Vita games on your telly, but you couldn't play any of the games that had like touchscreen stuff. So you couldn't play Uncharted Golden Abyss, for example. You'd have to not play that, basically. Like Persona 4 didn't have any of the Vita back touch or front touch shit involved, so yeah, that's probably the easiest way. But to be honest with you, just play 5. It's easier for you to access.
I'll play
5. Great, Bally. Do you want to take this next one from Capsule J?
So Capsule J is from the internet. It says, Dear Bally and NBZ, more so than in any prior year, I found myself emphasizing playing current games. However, the older games I've played in 2019 have all been gems. Here's my top 5 games I played this year that didn't come out this year. Number 5, Wise Memories of Celeta.
Please, Bally. Ease.
Celceta.
Salsetta. I think it's Ease Memories of Salsetta. Salsetta.
Memories of Salsetta. Having beaten this game, my journey through Falcom's action RPG series is 50% complete. Adol's adventures continue to be a delight, even though the dialogue in this one probably should have spent a little more time on the editor's desk. Number 4, Bomb Chicken. As cute as it was challenging, this explosive puzzle platformer was clucking good time. Number 3, The Messenger. This game's combination of satisfying platforming, quirky humor, and catchy music made it stand out from the pack of recent retro-style platformers. Number 2, Prey. With the intricate level design of Dishonored and the tone of Half-Life, Prey got its hooks into me deep. Number 1, Forza Horizon 4. I'm generally not a car guy, but racing fancy sports cars around the virtual UK was a blast. It helped tremendously that this is one of the most accessible racers I've ever played, with a rewind feature, a variety of difficulty options. Honourable mention goes to the gardens between this little puzzle game. Was such a pleasant surprise. A big thanks to you guys for recommending it. I'm looking forward to hearing your and fellow listeners' non-2019 goatees.
Fantastic. I want to point out Bomb Chicken here is one that I've been eyeing for a long time.
Yeah.
It's been on my watch list on Switch.
Is it on Switch? Yeah, it's on Switch.
Yeah. It came out, I think that was like its launch was on Switch. It seems really cool. That I want to...
It was like January or February, right? It was really early.
No, it came out last year. That's why it's a non this year.
What am I talking about?
Yeah.
I just remember watching the Giant Bomb Quick Look. Like,
right.
Is that not?
It was like end of last year, I think, maybe September or something. I don't know.
Okay, right. That's why I'm getting confused.
Ease is a series that people talk about on RFN and stuff, and I've heard a lot about Ease. They did a retroactive on Ease Book 1 and 2 back in the day. It's an RPG series that is like probably the furthest thing that Bally will ever play in his life. But yeah, the Salsetta sound is one that I've heard good things about, so maybe one day. Cool. Then we have B King, who wrote in. B King wrote us an essay basically. so he sent us like other games as well for like next time. But he's got 2 games for games that didn't come out this year. Which I've cut down a little bit. But he says, number 2, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I feel proud of myself for finishing a big JRPG like this one this year. I had not played any of the Xenoblade games, although I owned the first game on 3DS. I had a hard time getting into it and ended up watching an entire playthrough of it on YouTube. What struck me most about the game was its world design, which at times was breathtaking, especially on the big screen. I found the battle system to be quite complex, but very satisfying. The battles were never too hard in my opinion, and I never really had to grind either. I actually really enjoyed the story as well, although I found there to be a lull somewhere in the middle of the game, but it ended quite strong in my opinion. And number 1, Celeste. I am not much of a fan of platformers or pixel art, so I initially didn't pick up Celeste, despite the amount of praise it got from reviewers and you guys. But when it was on sale for about 100 Swedish kronor, around £8, I just couldn't resist. And I must say, I'm glad I didn't. At first I had some issues with the controls, but as soon as it clicked for me, it handled like a dream. As I mentioned earlier, I'm usually not the biggest fan of pixel art, since I didn't grow up playing games from that era, not counting Pokemon. So the fact that the characters in the story actually managed to move me was really surprising. Overall, I can't praise this game enough. I'm planning to go back to it at some point to check out the DLC. I've heard it's pretty difficult though, so I probably don't have the time, let alone skill, to beat it.
You just got to get to the DLC. That's what I'm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Bally can't even get to the DLC yet. You've got to beat all the B-sides and unlock all the hearts, the hidden hearts, and play level 8 and then do the B-side of 8.
Oh, I'm gonna get there at some point though. I enjoyed what I played of Celeste this year. Going back to it. Both our individual number 1s and our combined number 1 game of last year, right?
Yes, so it was. Yeah,
it's aged well, even though we're only 1 year on.
No, for sure. It's interesting, not being a fan of platformers or pixel art. What are you doing listening to this show? Hello? That's the foundation of anything we like. Also, yeah, shout out to Xenoblade 2. I still enjoy that game a lot. It's very good.
Our next list is from Matraya. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Do let me know how we can pronounce it in the future. Anyway, number 5, Greece. Or Greece? I think we go with Greece. Number 4, Transistor. Number 3, Slap City. Number 2, Towerful. So we've got a little description for the top 2. Matt makes really, really good games. I picked this up because of how much I loved Celeste, and wow, this is local multiplayer at its finest. Similar to Celeste, simply moving around feels very nice, yet the game only has a few actions and buttons. The low skill floor and really high skill ceiling makes this a lot of fun no matter who you're playing with. And number 1, Ace Attorney Miles Edgeworth Investigations 2. The narrative of MEI 2 is peerless within AA.
Ace
Attorney. Ace Attorney, double A. Batteries. Miles Edgeworth went from someone I liked to my favorite AA battery character on one of the best soundtracks. Case 3 is easily the best non-final case, and the final case is up there and also has the most surprising plot twist in the series. The gameplay gimmick is my favorite since the introduction of the Magatama, and the characters are fantastic. I won't delve into spoiler territory, but the Investigation's exclusive characters are great, and some returning favorites have their best moments. Detective Gumshoe completely steals the show at points. Anyway, enough fanboying. Basically, don't let the Japanese only release put you off this game. If you enjoy the Ace Attorney series, I would be shocked if you don't love this game, and don't let MEI 1 not being so good put you off.
I'm very happy that I gave you that one to read, because with no clue or context for anything in Ace Attorney, pretty good.
This is just the episode where it's like, let's see how many video games Bally's really heard of. To be honest.
Exactly.
There's a lot of stuff out there. I'm like, what is this? Okay.
So basically, they back in the day, they put out a spin-off for Ace Attorney, which was based around Miles Edgeworth. Miles Edgeworth is he's like the main antagonist of the first Ace Attorney game, but he's like one of the fan favorite characters, and he's really good. And he's like a core character in the original trilogy of Ace Attorney. So they did a spin-off with Miles Edgeworth because he's the prosecutor. So he doesn't. Basically, this entire game is more built around just investigating crime scenes and stuff like that, as opposed to the courtroom drama that you get with Ace Attorney. So it's kind of a game without my favorite part of Ace Attorney, which is why I haven't really tried Edgeworth. And yeah, as they mention, the first game apparently isn't that good, but the second one seems to be quite good. So interesting, very good. And Towerfall is another one which it's one of those local multiplayer games which I don't know if it has online multiplayer at all, because it's like, when playing games like that, I would like to have the ability to play them with people over the internet. That's why stuff like Speedrunners was so good, because I could do that.
Well, it's the sort of game, if it's cheap, we can just play local multiplayer one time, and it's kind of
sure.
It makes it worth it that we've had like a day hanging out, just playing a game or something. So
Yeah, for
totally
sure.
Do. What is Slap City?
I have no idea. Yeah.
Wow.
But seems cool. And then we have Tim. So Tim wrote in, number 5, Papers, Please. A totally unique experience unlike any other game. Seeing the strange branching scenarios unfold and feeling genuinely helpless to do everything makes you feel unlike any other game. Number 4, Bastion/Transistor. Which is a cheat, putting two games together from the same dev. Overall, I like the fun tactics and customizability of Transistor over the fluid gameplay of Bastion, but both were short, fun experiences on Switch. Number 3, Pokemon Sun. I've not had this much fun with Pokemon since playing White with friends back in 2011. Unique region theme and cool Pokemon put these games far above X and Y. Number 2, Overcooked/Overcooked 2. Cheating and including both games of the series here. My wife does not play many games, but we love making a plan together and executing for a perfect 3-star run. And number 1, Dead Cells. Combat reminiscent of Hollow Knight and an addicting gameplay loop make for an incredible experience. Yeah, solid list there. Bastion is a game that I played 4 or 5 hours of back in the day, and it didn't really click with me. I've been meaning to give Transistor a go, and also Pyre, which is the game that came out a couple of years back that Supergiant made. And Papers, Please is a really interesting one. I think you'd be interested in Papers, Please. It's about... I remember Patrick Klepek talking about it in Giant Bomb Game of the year it came out, and it's basically like you're just sitting there at border control, and you are looking at people's identities and passports and stuff like that, and trying to cross-reference them and see whether you let them into the country or not. It's a very overtly political game, and very, very interesting.
Yeah, no, I'd be really keen on that. Yeah, is that on PS4 then?
I think it might be. It was originally PC only. It may even be on Switch at this point. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And I played Pokemon Sun this year as well. Had a good time with that game. And yeah, Overcooked is just, I love it. And I kind of struggle between Overcooked 1 and 2. They are both very, very good games. And I never got around to Dead Cells. No. Something about it doesn't really appeal to me.
I don't know. I played 4 or 5 hours of Dead Cells, and it didn't click in the same way as it did for other people. It's good. It's very well made.
Did it make your top 10 last year?
No, it didn't. No. But yes, very good.
Our next email is from Jiff, who's non-2019 games. Number 5, Azura's Wrath on PlayStation 3. Number 4, Devil May Cry 3 on PS2. Number 3, Thumper on Switch. Number 2, Shadow of the Colossus on PS3. Finally got around to this game and it was really cool. Some bosses I had a lot of trouble figuring out how to damage, but it wasn't super difficult overall. The scale of the boss fights were still fairly impressive though I imagine if I'd played it on release I would have been absolutely blown away, as these titans are huge. The best moments are undoubtedly when you work out how to best or scale fight the beast. Sometimes it can be a bit frustrating fumbling about, but pushing through it is so worth it. And then number 1, Princess Crown. I've never heard of this game.
No, neither have I. On the
my first
Saturn.
game diving into on the Saturn. This Japanese only release was the precursor to slightly more well-known games such as Odin Sphere,
Muramasa the Demon Blade.
Muramasa the Demon Blade?
Muramasa, yeah.
And Dragon's Crown. It plays fairly well as an action RPG of the 90s. The main heroine is armored and a bit heavy, but you can combo moves together to stun enemies, knock them down, and anticipate attacks for a counter dodge to offset that. The main scenario is a little padded, but beating the game reveals mini episodes where you get to play as other characters you met throughout the game and get their backstories. All in all, this was a pretty full package game and absolutely was my favorite game I played this year that didn't come out this year.
Yeah, I think that you just have zero clue of all these Japanese games, basically, is where, like, you throw a name at Bally and it's like, I did Muramasa. Like, Muramasa has been talked about for years and years.
I know the word Muramasa, I just I couldn't tell you what type of game that even was.
Yeah, like, I mean, in Dragon's Crown came out, 6-7 years now ago. It was on Vita, it was on PS4, and it was like this very, like, the character designs were just very over the top, and it was like a side-scrolling brawler essentially. So it seems like Princess Crown is more in that vein to some degree, but very interesting to hear about games like this, because I've never heard of Princess Crown before, but it sounds very cool, and it seems like a piece of history that kind of precedes a lot of these maybe more well-known games. I mean, like, a lot of people don't know what Odin Sphere is, but I've heard of all these games at least.
Thumper. Have you ever tried Thumper?
Thumper is I actually have it downloaded because it's on Game Pass. Cool. So I'll boot it up at some point.
So it's like this. It's like rhythm-based. Almost like rhythm-based F-Zero or something.
Yeah,
like it kind of looks like F-Zero.
Kind of looks like.
I know
that,
it's on
it?
Switch. Like I'm kind of keen to try it at some point if it's like on sale or something. But
yeah, it's been sitting there. I've had it downloaded on Game Pass for a little while now. I will jump into it probably at some point soon and give it a look and see what it's like. Shout out to Asura's Wrath. I did a video on the demo of Asura's Wrath on my channel.
I remember that. It's just the most ridiculous
It
thing.
is just fucking insanity. I love how stupid that game is. It's just, the game is basically just QTEs and cutscenes, but it's amazing. Like, it is just bombastic on a universe type scale. Yeah, you should, if you've not heard of Asura's Wrath, go and look some shit up about that game. It is wild. It's pretty awesome.
DMC3, did you play that?
No. So I played the first Devil May Cry, and I played Devil May Cry 5. 3 is the one that most people talk about as the kind of crown jewel of the series, like the one that most people love the most and go back to and cite as like the best. I think it's kind of a debate now whether 5 is better than 3 or whatever, and people go back and forth, but yeah, it's probably one that I do want to try at some point and give it a go. So yeah.
Cool.
Well,
thank you everyone writing in, and I'll say it again, but we've got Game of the Year coming next episode, so we want your games that came out this year. Send them in, send in your lists. That's to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We want all your lists. That would be great. Well, we've said your games of the year that didn't come out this year. Now let's move into the next segment where we're going to be talking about our own games of the year that didn't come out this year.
Okay, we're back. It's time to talk video games. An alien concept, I know, for many of you, but it's what we're going to do here, and it is time to talk about our favourite games of the year that we played this year that didn't actually come out this year. A tongue twister of a title that in all the time I'm always like, hey Bally, should we just change it to like old game of the year?
We're too far down the line now.
No, and you're like, no, we need to stick to our nonsense and continue to perpetuate this just ludicrous title.
I feel it's what we're famous for. Like, it's become such a staple.
It's what we're famous for. Yeah, exactly.
You know,
sure.
It's like it's one that everyone does a game of the year list. That's easy to do. This is the bit that makes us unique.
Exactly, yes, because we talk about lots of old games on this show, and we're always catching up on a backlog of some sort. We're always, looking back to the past and discussing games that informed the games of today, which is helpful. I think it gives you,
yeah, it's super important.
Good historical background and things like that. Often I will just go down rabbit holes and play things that I don't actually enjoy, just for the historical curiosity of them, which you can say is maybe bad, but it's one of those things. Like when you're as deep into video games as we are, I think it's there's a certain level to which you're willing to go to experience things.
I mean, the good games aren't good games without the games that came before them. Like
exactly,
that's how they got good.
Totally,
they don't just start good.
Yeah, I mean, some did. Mega Man. Shout out to Mega Man 2, fucking killer. Just still to this day. Flawless.
That's alright.
It's Look, good. that boss where you have to use the crash bombs and it just shoots. Yeah. It's maybe one of the worst things of an NES game.
Otherwise, it's pretty good.
Yeah, you can figure it out. All right. Well, we have 10 games each to talk about. This will function as it usually does, where we each say our number 10, then we each say our number 9, and go down the list until we get to number 1, and then at the end we'll kind of recount them for you. So. Let's, without further ado, kick it off. Bally, what's your number 10 of the year that didn't come out this year, that you played this year?
My number 10 game of the year that didn't actually come out this year is Fire Emblem Fates Conquest.
Oh, nice, okay.
So this
I'm surprised this made it onto the list.
Yeah, I mean, I started this game back when it came out. I sort of beat Birthright, and then I think I went into Conquest like a little bit after that, and then
I think keen-eared listeners will remember a period of time at the end of 2016 where you're like, oh, I'm going to play Majora's Mask, also I'm going to play Pokemon Sun, also I'm going to play Fire Emblem Conquest, also I'm going to play Metroid Prime 3, and you took on like these 10 games at once, and I was like, Bally, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And then you came over to my house at the start of 2017, and I was like, Bally, you need a refresh to get yourself back into video games. Yeah. So I've made you play Brothers, and you're like, all right, I'm in again.
I needed a rebalancing in my mind of what the hell I was doing with my video game playing time. But I got back to Fire Emblem Fates Conquest earlier this year. Played a lot of it while I was in Japan, and it's a really great game. It's like, I absolutely love the Japanese architecture when you're in Hoshido, and like the cherry blossom, the art style.
There is a map in Conquest that is very cherry blossom. It's the map where you're fighting the Pegasus lady, begins with an H.
Near the end, yeah.
I can't remember her name, her something, whatever. But yes, that map in particular is like pink and blossoms all over the place.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I actually enjoy the plot of the Fates games. I think it's quite interesting, and I think Conquest is very tough, but I was obviously playing on non-classic, so my characters would come back, and there were a few maps where I definitely needed that, and it was kind of one of those things where, because I wasn't on classic, the second you kind of lose a unit, you almost lose like 3-4 units quite easily. Like it totally ramps up. Like it's a cumulative effect essentially. So either I was defeating the map in the right way, no one would die, or I'd lose like 4 units because there was a chink in my armor, and then they just exploited it essentially. So strategically, it's a really cool game. And yeah, maybe I did, by playing a lot of Fire Emblem early in the year, it's made me a bit tougher to get through 3 houses, and I'm on a slow build with that. But
yeah, also like there are things about the 3DS games in particular that I think stand well and above what 3 Houses does in terms of like visually the map design, right? Like you look at how nice some of those maps are in terms of just their aesthetic. And, you know, obviously they'd done Awakening by this point. Like, they'd really got to terms with the 3DS and the what they could push out of it. And some of the environments, like some of the snowy environments, or as you said, a lot of the Japanese architecture, just really nice looking sprites and maps that it's something that I miss when Fire Emblem is now going down this path of 3D, is we're going to lose out. And I think the 3DS was good at still carrying that torch of some sprite-based stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are sprites in Three Houses. Like, when you're changing your classes, each character, each class has its own little sprite, but those aren't on the maps, you know?
Exactly,
like, it's much more Path of Radiant style now, which I just don't think looks as nice visually.
And as much as you say, the 3DS games just have that, they've got this visual look to them, this style that is just really great with the sprite design. On top of that, the 3DS games were just really good at spreading the numbers across two screens in a really manageable, understandable way, where I think that one downside of Three Houses is sometimes just accessing the right stats, accessing what this power does what, because on the 3DS, like, if you're unsure of something on the bottom screen, you just tap it with the stylus or your thumb, and it'll just tell you, like, oh yeah, that's this is how that works. Whereas Three Houses, you're kind of scrolling through menus, I'm going to get to that to find out what this ability does or whatever, and the touch screen of the 3DS just made all of that a lot more streamlined, a lot smoother.
Like, why in the hell is the reclass option listed under inventory? It's just nonsensical. It's just so baffling, some of that stuff, for sure.
Yeah, so definitely Conquest felt like they'd really established how a 3DS Fire Emblem game could look and work in terms of like mechanics, and it just excelled in all those areas. So that's my number 10, Fire Emblem Fates Conquest.
Great, very good. My number 10 is Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom. I think I talked a little bit about Ni no Kuni 2 on the podcast. It was one of those games. No, but it was one of those games that I picked up at the start of the year. So I got 2 games at the start of the year, really cheap. It was Sushi Striker and Ni no Kuni 2. Both of them were about 10 quid, or like under 10 quid. And I was like, I want to play both of these, and I'll pick them up. And Ni no Kuni 2 is just a really comfortable game. It's very easy to just sit back and kind of chill with. It has a really cool soundtrack, and it's one of those rare games that runs at 60 frames per second on PlayStation 4, and it just looks so much nicer as a result. And obviously you have the art style, which is Ghibli inspired, and Ghibli didn't work with level 5 on this game as opposed to the first one, because the first Ni no Kuni, you have actual cutscenes that are literally just Ghibli animated sequences, like 2D traditional animated sequences, whereas this game doesn't really have... It has like some of that stuff, but I don't think, they weren't directly working with them. But it still keeps that style, and it is one of the best looking games I've played in a while. That particular... And it's the reason I think on this podcast we tend to prefer art direction versus like technical powerhouse graphics or realistic graphics, is that stuff not only ages much better, but it's just, there's a crispness to it. There's a way in which the colors can be flat and yet really work for the world it's going for. And Ni no Kuni 2 is just full of color and life and just these vibrant towns you go to. The entire world is kind of built around animals as people, so like there's a town with dog people or cat people or like snake people and stuff like that, and so it's this interesting mix of different societies that you visit, and each town has its own unique theme. So one of them is very like casino based, there's one which is very kind of mechanical and structured, and they all are very distinct, and the world itself is actually quite small, so it doesn't feel like you are on a really overwhelmingly large adventure. It's a relatively short game for a JRPG. It took me maybe 30 hours to finish, but like those 30 hours were spread across a really long period of time, because I feel like this game isn't the strongest in terms of its story. Its combat system is kind of easy and like breezy, and I think a lot of people criticize the combat for having a lack of challenge, whereas for me it was kind of like, I don't really want to grind. I kind of just want to chill and not worry about that stuff. So it was actually perfectly pitched, and it was just a very chill game that I just tapped away at constantly for like 3 or 4 months, and finally got to the end of. And it's not mind-blowing, it's not revolutionary, it's just a really nice RPG, and I think it's just a lot of fun to play. So yeah, Ni no Kuni 2. I don't really remember a huge amount about it, but I don't think that was
Quite
really
early
the point.
in the year,
I think,
right?
yeah, I mean, I think I picked it up in about February, and I didn't finish it till like end of April, or like May or something like that. So
nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'll check it out. And I think the first game is on Switch now, right? They ported that over.
Oh,
I don't think.
they?
Yes, I don't think 2 is.
Is it a port that works?
I was hearing skeptical things about it, so I probably need to look into that. But yeah, I don't know. I think these days it's the toss of a coin, isn't it? You just really don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ni no Kuni 2, my number 10.
My number 9 is Luigi's Mansion.
Should we tag team it? Because
number
my number 9
well.
is also Luigi's Mansion.
This often happens with our lists. We
With our,
have this
backlog
power to
clubs.
keep things at the same number somehow.
Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah, go for it. Talk about Luigi's Mansion.
Sure. So this is obviously the re-release
Yeah,
of
it's
the GameCube version on 3DS.
Yeah.
And it's a game I owned way back when the GameCube came out. I only played through like the first hour or two, but I'm so glad we went back to it with this backlog club, because I think this game just offers a lot of charm and like a lot of Nintendo polish on a style of game that is something that Nintendo had never really gone for. Like, there's no jump button. It's essentially an exploration, walking about kind of puzzle.
It's an adventure style game that's also a horror game, right?
Yeah.
But it's Nintendo's take on the horror genre,
Exactly.
which is not really to scare you. It's interesting because they basically make Luigi the one who's more scared than the player, right? Like, Luigi is terrified, and you as a player, unless you're like a really young kid and you are kind of scared by the darkness and the lightning crackles and things like that, which I can see. Definitely. And some of the portrait ghosts as well. Like, the thing that I take away a lot from this game is the non-Nintendo things about it. Just the art design on the portrait ghost feels
Creepy.
unlike anything Nintendo's really designed before. It just feels not
Like
what they would make.
Eyeballs without pupils is like a common thing on all the ghosts in all the Luigi's Mansion games, and it's kind of creepy. Like,
but I think in the later games, like, they tended towards more cartoony nature towards the ghosts, whereas this game, they're far less that type of design,
yeah, I mean, I think some in Luigi's Mansion 3 are quite freaky, actually, as well. Similar to this game. And then 2, there's almost no portrait ghosts or any ghosts with any character other than your bog standard one. So
I will say that, like, it feels like the personality was kind of stripped from 2 to some degree, whereas like 1 and 3 feel like they're just brimming with personality in terms of the enemy designs.
And it was really interesting playing this game this year before 3 came out, where we sort of had a discussion about what could 3 be, and kind of I think 3 just kind of hit it out of the park, actually.
Totally,
a lot of the good things that this original game did, we were like, it would be really nice if 3 was a bit of a blend of 2 and 1, where it took the best aspects from both games, and I think it kind of did that and more, which is kind of impressive.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be talking about Luigi's Mansion 3 on the next episode, but this game in particular for me was it was a really tight experience. And I think back in the GameCube days, that was a negative that a lot of reviewers gave it was, and back then the way that reviews were scored and things, it was like value and things like that were taken into account. So people, they're paying full price for this day one of GameCube launch, and they would be done with it first weekend because it is a game you can beat in 5-6 hours. It's not lengthy in any way. And I actually went after a lot of the boos. I think I almost got every single one. I got like very close to the end. I think there was a thing where I couldn't jump back into my save file afterwards, and I was really annoyed by it because I wanted to go back and get those last boos, but I couldn't, which was frustrating.
If you're going to do collecting things in games, make it durable for the player to do that. Like, to give them a number, like a tally to rank up. Give them the ability to go back into the game after the final boss. Like, I think games that emphasize collecting, I think Luigi's Mansion is a game like that, need to just have better means to do it.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's a remake, right? So, like, even if this was the case in the original game, you should have fixed it for this version. But they did have a counter, like, there's 50 boos, and I got, like, 48 of them or whatever. So I did have a good track of where I needed to go and what the last couple were. It's just I beat the game before actually going out of my way to do it, and ended up not being able to go back for it. Not that it really matters, like, you don't really get much in the way of a reward for doing so, but it was enjoyable enough. Like, I think it's maybe one of the weaker aspects of the series generally is the boos, because they're basically a hide-and-seek mechanic that can get frustrating.
Yeah, I completely ignored them more. Well, you have to do some of them in this game, and then I just ignored them in, like, Luigi's Mansion 3, pretty much.
Yeah, well, I think this game actually makes it easier to go and get them simply because you're doing a lot of backtracking and, like, retraversal.
Yeah.
And I think the nice thing about the tightness of the original Luigi's Mansion is because the mansion is small enough, it feels much easier to just backtrack and explore it. Like, you don't feel like you're wasting that much time when you're doing so. There's not a lot of, like, loading between areas and stuff like that. So, and you do unlock shortcuts and doors which will make things easier to traverse. So for me, it is much more of a kind of diorama puzzle box small experience that is just very well executed on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's short, but I think, you know, in this day and age, people like us kind of appreciate that, I think.
Yeah,
you know,
short
like,
games are welcome.
yeah.
We've got plenty of long games on our plate. It's nice to play the short ones as well.
It gets in and out. It has lots of fun ideas that it throws at you. I will say, and I think this is generally for me a weakness of the series that they have to some degree corrected in third game is the bosses. Like, especially the final boss with Bowser and, like, just the aiming on it. Aiming in Luigi's Mansion has never been great. And I feel like it's just one of those things that's hard to solve when you have a fixed perspective camera and you're using a second stick to kind of aim, or, like, in this case, gyro controls to aim or whatever. Yeah. That stuff can get a little tricky, but yeah, it was great. And obviously, if you want to hear us talk more about Luigi's Mansion, we did a whole dedicated segment, our Backlog Club, on it earlier this year, which you can search through our archives for. I think it's in the title of whatever episode it is. It was around, like, summer.
There's a Backlog Club playlist on our YouTube channel as well.
There
if you
is.
want to just listen to all our Backlog Club episodes.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, Luigi's Mansion. Both of our number 9. Bally, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is Nidhogg 2.
Oh, nice.
So we're not into fighting games, really. We love our Smash Brothers. We play a lot of that together. But otherwise, we played Soul Calibur back in the day.
We did, yeah.
And other than that, there's nothing that really, in my mind, replicated that feeling you get from Smash Brothers in multiplayer until I'd played Nidhogg 2 with you. Like, it felt, it's that feeling of, this isn't a fighting game. Like, there's platforming involved, there's throwing items involved, you know, like it feels different to just your standard fighting game, which I've always struggled to, like, get into. And
well, it's because a lot of fighting games demand a lot from you, right? Like, they demand learning of complicated combos, or they demand,
there's quite a high barrier of entry, whereas this, like Smash Brothers, actually, I would argue, has a very low barrier of entry, so it's easy to pick up but harder to master, I guess, in a way. And that's really great for multiplayer when we both downloaded it at the same time when it was on sale, and just had an absolute blast for a few hours. Like, it is really, really enjoyable, just picking up the different weapons and sprinting across the screen. And I do like the art style. It really grew on me. And this is now in my mind as, like, this is our, in my view, like, our go-to versus multiplayer game after Smash Brothers, like, in my mind now. And that's quite a pedestal, honestly, which I think
it's hard to kind of get up to that level. And it is also one of those games that I like having on my Switch now, because if I'm in a situation where, like, I'm on a plane or a train or whatever, and someone wants to play at the same time and do a multiplayer. One of my cousins is like, I can show them a game that's a multiplayer game. Rocket League was my go-to before, and Rocket League's a hard one for a lot of people to get into. It's just difficult for them to get their head around. Whereas I think something like Nidhogg 2 is much more approachable and easy to understand and explain, but also very hard to master. You know, like you can play Nidhogg 2 at a pretty surface level, but the depth that's there that you can extract from it seems significant enough that you know you can take it to a high level competition
locally with 2 Joy-Cons.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
I think that's kind of the point.
That's the perfect way to show someone like a game, I guess.
Yeah, it is, and it you know, as much as I don't really like using a Joy-Con as a controller, it's fine for like 10 minutes of playing with somebody or whatever. You know, you can get over it. So nice. I just want to play more of it, you know. I think this is one of those ones where when we're at the same place together at some point,
it's like we've got to factor in a bit of time for Nidhogg 2, you know.
Yes,
like, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Great. My number 8 is Daigaktun Saiban Naruhodo Ryunosuke no Boken, which is the great Ace Attorney. Which is the Japanese only Ace Attorney spin-off that is based in London, which stars, people say it's like an ancestor of Phoenix Wright. I don't know if it is or not, but he's a different character, and like the whole story is that they're going from Japan to England, and you know, he meets up with Sherlock Holmes, and he's a detective, and you're solving cases that are based in kind of that era of time, which is interesting because the crimes that take place back in, the 1800s or whatever, are very different from the types of crimes that you see in current modern Ace Attorney, because modern Ace Attorney is like present/near future. So there are some ridiculous like technology things that get thrown into the mix, whereas you can't do that back in the day when they didn't have security cameras and stuff like that. So solving the mystery and like figuring out the ways in which, like, DNA testing wasn't really a thing back then, right? So they had to come up with these other ways of solving cases, and I found it really enjoyable. I blasted through it in a very short space of time, which tends to be the case when I get to an Ace Attorney game these days, is like the story and the way the cases interlink is generally pretty important, and so if you're going through it at a slower pace over a longer period of time, you may forget some of the threads that will end up coming up later, and so doing it as condensed as possible usually benefits your experience. And this isn't near the best Ace Attorney games I've played. I've heard a lot of people, you know, proclaim it as the greatest in the series. I don't really agree with that. I think that, for me, a lot of the cases are good. None of them feel transcendent, and none of them feel like they give you the sense of closure you want, because there's a lot of things set up in this game, right? Like, one of the first cases is there's a character, you basically, when you get to England, Sherlock Holmes has a little girl called Iris Watson, and Iris Watson, like, is the daughter of, or maybe the granddaughter of, I can't remember, of Watson, from actual Sherlock Holmes. And Watson dies. He's like the victim of the murder case in the first case of this game. And that is left hanging for most of this entire thing, and by the end it's still not resolved. So a lot of this game feels like setup for the second game, which is out in Japan, but fans haven't...
And you've not played the second game?
No, so fans haven't translated the second game yet, because this game came out in like 2013 maybe in Japan, and it's taken fans this long, like 6 years or whatever, to do a fan translation of it, which I understand, because these games are basically entirely text, so there's a lot of stuff to localize and translate, and it's a really weird case, the reason they didn't bring it over here. I think part of it is that a lot of the dialogue in this game is real fucking racist, like really bad, and like the way that it's localized feels pretty rough as well. It is a fan translation, so you know, mileage may vary on that stuff, but there's a lot of anti-Japanese racism from the British characters, which is interesting from a Japanese developer, because, like, obviously that stuff would have happened back then, right? And it is historically contextual, but the way that they say, like, the way they phrase some of these insults is just feels a bit bad. But the game itself, I enjoyed a lot. I I would have enjoyed it more had it had a better resolution to all these questions it asked. And I think the second game probably is the thing that delivers on a lot of that stuff. I can't play that right now. So until we get there, until I eventually in like 2024, whenever they finish the localization of the second one, we'll play that and get some resolution. But yeah, it's another Ace Attorney game. I'm always going to like an Ace Attorney game. It's a solid one. So yeah, good stuff.
Nice.
It's my number 8.
My number 7 is Moss on the PlayStation VR. So I bought PlayStation VR on a Black Friday sale last year. So I've had an exactly 1 year with it's not a system, but the technology. And I've played quite a number of games, but Moss is definitely up there as one of my favorites. And you play as a little mouse. What's his name? Like Quirrell or something?
Quill, I believe. Yeah.
Quill,
I think it's a she, isn't it? I think it's female mouse. Yeah. Quill.
I don't know. You play as a little mouse, and there's some combat. There's some nice environmental puzzles, and it's just a really lovely world to be in. On top of all that, it's a very short game, but the combination of puzzles, exploration, combat, like it works really well. This game isn't doing anything overly new or anything, but it's just an existing concept that they've kind of done in VR very well, and they've set up like a second game, so hopefully that will come out in the next 4 years or something. But it's a really cool experience that I think, again, it's very hard to sell VR games over a podcast, but it's something that if you do have a PSVR, it's a very short, simple, easy game to pick up. And yeah, I was really impressed. Like, I just think that the scale of what they do with the mouse when you've got that headset on works really well. It's a really cool game.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to do it from the perspective of you are the larger character who's also interacting with the world, right?
Yeah.
So having you as almost godlike figure while this little mouse is running around dioramas is a neat idea. When I played some of it, I had a lot of problems with like visualizing where the mouse was on the screen, like whereabouts in the diorama, and also top 10 worst jumps of the year, 100%. This and Super Lucky's Tale, like garbage jumps. Like Quill cannot jump for the fucking life of her, which is an instant turn off for me in any type of platforming style game.
I mean, there's not much jumping in this game, but I hear what you're saying.
No, I mean, it's like climbing up ledges and things like that, right? Like and the combat seemed a little bit. You know, it's one of those games that to me, if it wasn't in VR, it would be completely unremarkable. You know, like there's nothing special about it from a gameplay perspective. It feels like a bit of a Zelda-y, adventure-y style game that without the VR experience kind of falls flat. It just didn't, I don't know, it didn't stand out to me that much.
Totally. If you're not sold on VR, it's not going to convert you, but if you are sold on VR, like it's really cool.
Yeah, it seems like a good experience. And I think they're going to do more of it, right? Like there was a DLC thing they put out maybe, or maybe there's one coming.
I know that certainly the story like is set as like chapter 1, so there could be more games, but I can't remember the studio who makes it. They're a very small team, so who knows about like funding issues and things, but we'll see.
Totally, yeah, great. My number 7 is Battle Chef Brigade, a very weird game that a lot of people had been, a lot of people have been very positive on in the last few years, and I really liked it. I think it's one of those games that I went into it being like, well, I don't really like these elements, I don't really care for these elements, but somehow when you put them together, it works. And I think one of the standout elements of Battle Chef Brigade actually is its characters and its storytelling. It's full-on voice acted, and it's set in this world, which to me, I felt kind of at home with, because it has a similar vibe to the anime Food Wars, which Shokugeki no Soma, I think, is the Japanese name. Food Wars is like one of the few anime of modern times that I've watched, and it's a lot of fun, but it's an anime about a cooking school, basically, where young chefs go, and their school is basically competitions and cooking crazy dishes.
Make incredible Japanese food.
Yes.
That's like photorealistic almost.
Well, they do lots of like other types of food as well. And the food looks incredible. It's so gorgeous. Like the animation on that show is amazing. It's it's weird because it's also drawn by someone who previously worked in hentai. So like there's some very like when they basically orgasm when they eat food, and so like it goes into this weird cutscene where like their clothes are flying off and shit. You know, your typical Japanese nonsense.
As you do when you're eating food, you know.
Obviously, yeah.
Especially Japanese food.
Yes, but like I did enjoy the characters in that anime, and like I really enjoy that setting of like you're in a school and you've got like, you know, like My Hero Academia is like that. A lot of Japanese anime are in a setting of like it's in a school and there's this special thing and it's different than what you'd usually see. So Battle Chef Brigade has that vibe to it, but it's far more grounded. Like it has an anime styling to it, but it feels more Western in its approach to how they kind of tell a story and how they kind of, you know, bring their characters to life. So for me, that was a real highlight. I think it's what drew me along. It's what kept me really engaged with it. But it's also this split between action combat, like side-scrolling brawling almost, and match 3 puzzle. And if you know this podcast, you know that we're not really mobile people. We don't care about match 3. That's not a genre or a style of game or puzzle that I have ever really given a shit about. But this game really works because it's the particular style of it. The way that the idea is you get these gems, and if you match 3 of the same color, they merge together into like a level 2 gem. And then if you get 3 level 2 gems, they merge to a level 3 gem. And so you're constantly trying to... You have like a limited box of space. It's like a 4x4 grid. And so within that grid, you're constantly trying to take these gems, match them together so you can shrink them and make more space so you can have more gems. So the ultimate idea is like, I want to have as many level 3 gems as possible. And so each meal that they ask you to make will be like, oh, it's a fire and green, or like basically grass and fire style meal. So you want to get green gems and red gems. Or the second dish will be just blue, so you'll get blue gems. So you're constantly managing like multiple dishes at once, while also you have to run out and get your ingredients. So this is the part where you're doing the combat. So you're running outside, killing enemies, picking up different groups of gems, and the gems might be like 2 greens and a blue, or 1 yellow, or something like that, and you're just getting all of these, and you're trying to optimize as much as possible. So if you're making just a purely red dish, you want to get rid of those greens, and you want to get rid of those blues. You want to get only red gems, and so maybe there's an enemy that only drops red gems, so you just focus on killing them a bunch to get your ingredients. And it's timed as well, so it's like it feels like this Master Chef thing where you are under pressure from the time, you want to get the best dish possible, and you need to outscore your opponent. And it's so much fun. It really works. And there were later missions that got tricky enough to where I had to do them a couple of times. But generally, I think the difficulty curve was really nice, and it really eases you into it. It makes you figure out how the systems work and how it all kind of flows together. And it comes at the end like a really nice resolution. I just think it's an excellent game, and really, really fun, and just something different that was out of my comfort zone, and I ended up coming away from being very, very impressed by.
Nice. So
yeah, and you can get it on Switch as well. It's on Switch, so check it out. It's definitely highly recommended. I don't know if it's in the holiday sale or at the moment or something, but it might be over Christmas. So keep an eye out for it. Cool. Number 6, Bally.
My number 6 is another Backlog Club game that we played this year, and that's Wave Race 64.
Hell yeah.
So I had kind of low expectations for this game. I obviously was a huge fan of Blue Storm, and I just kind of thought, I don't know how well this N64 game is going to hold up. Like, to my knowledge, there's not a great number of N64 games that hold up incredibly well, and I was so wrong with this game. Like, in terms of its feel, it's like up there with the best racing games I've actually ever played, honestly, like in terms of like how good it feels.
And you know what? I agree.
Yeah,
weirdly,
totally.
You know, it's like, man, the turning and the cornering and just the way that you move yourself around, the momentum with the waves.
The wave physics
The wave
really
physics
well.
are way ahead of their time, like miles ahead of their time.
And, you know, visually it's not the prettiest, but for the time, like, it's kind of something that the wave physics and visually they work even today.
Oh, you mean how I thought that one area was a swamp and you were like, that's not a swamp?
It's like a nice lake. Aspen Lake, was it? Yeah.
It's kind of like a muddy lake, you know.
There's muddy parts of it. Yeah, every lake has muddy parts, but it's I think the diversity of courses is actually okay. It's not as good as the GameCube game for sure, but I just thought that's not what I guess you're playing Wave Race for. It's all about the feel, the racing, and I think that part just felt really good. And it's a very difficult game. I don't think I went back and played like all the hard mode, like the GP, but it's something I'd like to do. And yeah, man, we need another Wave Race game, and this game just made me want Wave Race again so much more. In many ways, it's as good as the GameCube game, and kind of made me think the GameCube game just basically made the game look a bit prettier, but it's ultimately exactly the same game with a few more racers, honestly, and that's not what I was thinking going into this game. So yeah, this is probably one of my surprises of the year, I would actually argue, even though it is number 6. Like it,
and it's in a series you like already, but I feel like expectation-wise, you're like, it's an N64 game, you know. We think about going back to N64 games all the time, and both of us are like, well, I don't know, these things haven't aged that well. And Wave Race 64 is a game that has aged remarkably well for what it is and that era. I agree.
Totally. And I mean, we're walking away from this game, and Nbz likes it, which for a Wave Race racing game is a huge success and speaks volumes of that game, I think. So.
Yeah, it didn't make my top 10 here. I'll just spoil you on that. It's not higher up my list, but
it's like, that's what it's my number 1.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, but I respect it. Right, I think it gave me respect for a series that I had zero respect for, to the point where, like, when we're talking about our top 50 games, I'm like, Bally, fuck off with Blue Storm. You haven't played that game in a decade. It doesn't deserve to be on here. And maybe my mind would be changed now if I was to play Blue Storm. But
at some point we're gonna get a GameCube Virtual Console or some sort of means to play GameCube games eventually, you'd hope. And I think it'd be nice if we both played a bit of Blue Storm then and see how it compares.
I don't know, man. Are Nintendo ever going to put anything that's not fucking 2D games on their service?
We're in a very weird place, and the GameCube is still the only place you can play GameCube games, which is...
It's unbelievable to me.
A travesty, but hopefully that will be remedied at some point.
Yeah,
it's a sort of like end of Switch life cycle thing you could imagine when
but like, why then? Like, why not now when everyone wants to play these games? Oh god,
who knows? I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing: like, a lot of companies are making dough from just throwing remasters and ports. Like, Resident Evil 4 is a GameCube game. Capcom is just like, yeah, let's just put the HD version of that out. You know, like. It's the thing that we talk about all the time is these collections happen, and it's like, well, Konami probably made way more money from just putting that Castlevania collection out there than if they had released Castlevania 3 on a virtual console. Just factually, that's true. Like, they will make more money.
I mean, if they want to sell a full price HD remake of Wave Race Blue Storm, it's going to be a bitter pill to swallow, but I'll probably still do it.
You will, because you're an idiot. Yeah, no, 100%.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Anyway, Nbz, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is a game I don't think I've talked about on this podcast, but I still put 20 hours into it this year.
Right.
Soul Calibur 6. I'm a big Soul Calibur guy. We played Soul Calibur 2 back in the day on GameCube, and I've always loved Soul Calibur. It's been the fighting game that's not Smash Brothers that I go to in terms of traditional ones. And even then, it's not really a traditional fighting game because it's a 3D fighter. Like, you can move around people and, like, it's weapons-based. And I think that's one of the things I always liked about it is every character has this flavor to them because they have these weird weapons. Like, Talim with, I don't even know what they're called, her, like, weird spinny things that she hits people in the face with. You have, like, Mitsurugi with his, like, slender sword, and you got, like, Keelik and his long bow staff. It's a game that has a lot of variety in it. And I played 4 on PS3, and the funny story about Soul Calibur 4 on PS3 is I bought the game for £5, and the exclusive, the way the characters worked in that game was like there was Darth Vader and Yoda, because they were the 2 special representatives. If you bought the PS3 version, you got Darth Vader. but you could buy the DLC character as well from the other version. So the Xbox got Yoda, and I spent £4 for DLC on Yoda. So I spent £5 for the game, and then I bought Yoda for £4, and I was like, I'm an idiot. Why did I do this?
Worth
it. It was worth it. Also, Yoda's like fucking broken because he's so short that no one can hit him.
Yes.
So he like ducks under everybody. It's great. I barely played that much of Soul Calibur 4, but I did enjoy it just for the Star Wars-ness of it, and just checking back in with the series. 6 was the game that I was like, okay, this looks really good. Like, it seems like they're really back into it now that it's a new release, and feels like they have done a lot of work on a good single player, and like online seems good, and also the character creator seemed awesome. So I was on sale, and I was like, man, it's been so long since I played Soul Calibur. I want to get back into one of these and see if I can figure it out. And I freaking loved it, man. It's so much fun getting back into the groove of learning how to like guard, break, and things like that, and just being better at understanding the mechanics of fighting games. Because I think back then when we played Soul Calibur 2, we never did that type of shit, right? We'd just like wail on each other, and like you would just stand far away from me and just like tap me with your fucking stick.
I'd be on like a 10-game Keelik winning streak,
Exactly.
And then
it'd be really annoying. And all I would do is try and grab you with Mitsurugi all the time and do that one move where he like rolls you across the ground, It
was a good time.
It was a good time, but we were bad at fighting games. We didn't really understand how they worked. Whereas this, like, I played quite a few games online, and like most of the time I got my ass kicked, but there were moments where I was like, okay, I figured this out, and I feel like I know how to use this character now. Also, more bonus points, the guest character in this game is fucking Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher.
I was just about to ask, who is the guest character again?
Yes.
And yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's
cool. He fits so perfectly. He is a perfect fit for the Soul Calibur universe. Honestly, could have just been a brand new Soul Calibur character, and I don't think people would have blinked an eye, because the way that he fights, the fact that he has like these signs, like magical signs that he can use, I think it's just a really inspired choice. And there's also a Kaer Morhen stage, which is like, it's the castle that Geralt stays in for
awesome.
The start of Witcher 3, and the music's in there obviously as well. Like it's a really great representation of that character. And the DLC for Soul Calibur 6, I haven't got any of it, but like 2B from Nier is in that game as well. So they've done some really good character stuff in terms of the guests. And I think there's going to be another one. I think one of the characters from Samurai Showdown is going to be in it next, which I don't care that much about. But
is there any hope that Star Wars will ever come back? Kylo Ren, Rey.
Oh, dude, man, if you fucking put Kylo Ren in this game, oh damn, I would be so down. But yeah, I went through all of the main single player, which is not quite Weapon Master, but it's kind of the closest they've gotten to it since that thing. And it's got a lot of fucking dialogue, which is not voice acted, and it's just text, which I basically skipped all of it because it was just like, I didn't care at all. I was just like, okay, get me to the next fight. And some of those challenges are pretty tricky. I enjoyed getting through them and kind of figuring them out. And there's also like a secondary single player campaign, which is this kind of timeline thing where you play as each individual character on their own timeline, and it kind of goes through this story arc that intersects with the one that you did in the main narrative. So you kind of see it from different perspectives almost. And for me, though, I think the standout thing about this game is actually the character creator. I spent like 4 hours creating a character from Critical Role, Keyleth, who's a character from the first season of first campaign of Critical Role. And I was like, this is just a lot of fun. Like, just because there's so much flexibility to it, all these different ways that you can manipulate and maneuver things. I had a blast just figuring out how to use it, and just making something that actually looked pretty legitimately good, that I could then use as a character. And I was very surprised by that, because it's not the sort of thing I tend to get into. I did a lot when I was younger. Like, I remember me and Ali T spent hours just on WWE, one of the ones on PS2 that he owned, and we just sit there for ages just making characters and just figuring out stupid, funny things, and like putting clown noses on idiots and, that type of stuff that you were never into. Like, a lot of my other friends...
I was going to take that vanilla character and get going, That's
exactly,
what I'm here
yeah.
for.
But like, a lot of our other friends would like to do that stuff, and I enjoyed doing that stuff as well. And so I was always into some level of customization. I think it's why the customization stuff in Pokemon Sword and Shield has hit me so much. Is like, oh man, I actually do like this, and it is part of the experience, and it makes a difference. So yeah, it's a really well made game. It's I'm never going to be super competitive with it, but to hop in and play some online matches is great. And I think it's just a great engine. It looks fantastic, just really, really gorgeous at this point. Soul Calibur, they've really refined the style of it. So yeah, shout out to Soul Calibur 6. I thought it was going to come to Switch at one point, which is why I was holding out, but don't think it will. Yeah. I mean, it definitely could run. It wouldn't, look as nice. It'd probably...
Everything's possible on Switch now.
Yeah, like Mortal Kombat 11's on Switch, so, they could do Soul Calibur easily.
Cool. Well, my number 5 is Uncharted 3. So I've been working my way...
Drake's Deception.
Sorry, Drake's Deception, yes, exactly.
That's the subtitle, yeah.
Subtitle. I can't remember subtitles. It's just Uncharted.
Come on,
3.
Bally, you got to know all of them. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, Uncharted Drake's Fortune, Uncharted 4 A Thief's End, Uncharted Lost Legacy, get it down.
What about 4?
Golden Abyss, Thief's End, that's what I just said.
Oh, Thief's End, okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay, just testing you.
I know, don't worry.
I think I've played one Uncharted. It was more than one Uncharted a year now, I think. Or did I play first Uncharted? I can't even remember.
I think you played 1 and 2 in the same year.
Yeah, and then I played 3 this year. Hopefully play 4 and Lost Legacy next year. We'll see. But 2 was really high up my list last year of games that didn't come out that year. And this game is really good as well. It's a lot closer to 2 than 1 in terms of how much I enjoyed it, and the plot just keeps going. I love it. I really enjoy it. I think the puzzles in this game are really strong. The combat's not too difficult. There's one part where it's just relentless on that ship. And I actually went back and watched some of your Let's Play of this game. And you were very frustrated with that aspect, that part of the game.
I think the balancing is really bad for that part of the game. It's just not well considered in terms of the enemy closets. The endless just respawning is bad. It's not balanced in the same way that 2 was. 2, for me, is the peak of the series in terms of enemy balance and, shootouts and how long they last and how much you need to survive.
Yeah.
Whereas 1 was, the first game, so you can understand it. I don't understand 3. I really don't, because they should have honed it in by this point. They should have figured out, what is good pacing for this section. And, that entire lead-up, from the docks all the way onto the ship itself, is just a nightmare. It's not fun. And it's the weakest part of the game.
Definitely. And 2's got a lot of enemies that are much bulkier, and then they come in 2s or 3s, and there's not swarms of them in the same way. Whereas this game, there's loads of enemies a lot of the time, a lot like 1. 1 is the worst in terms of just a large number of enemies just coming at you. Whereas this game is a bit of a balance between 1 and 2. And there are some weaker parts where they just overdo the combat, and Uncharted's always at its weakest, I find, when you've been doing one thing for too long. If there's too much plot or too much puzzle or too much combat for one stretch of time, it's at its strongest, in 2, when it's going between one and the other on a constant basis, I find, and it constantly changes up the environments, the setting, the story, stuff happens, and this game is really good for the most part in those aspects, and that's why it's quite high up my list, because Uncharted is a fantastic formula. I'm playing through Jedi Fallen Order right now, and I find the bits I'm enjoying the most are the bits that are most similar to Uncharted, where it is more linear and stuff's unfolding, and you might do a puzzle here and there, or it's that linear story-driven game that I just think this hits it out of the park on. So yeah, I'm totally up for Uncharted 4 next year, and I think my plan was to beat all the Uncharteds and then do all the Tomb Raiders. That was my
that's
plan,
a good,
because we owned the
approach,
first 2 Tomb Raiders that Caroline's played and really enjoyed, and obviously they kind of came out after Uncharted, so hopefully there's a little bit of an evolution, although I appreciate 4 was after those Tomb Raider games, so back and forth.
For me, Tomb Raider has always been superior as video games. Uncharted has always been superior as storytelling. That's always been the dichotomy for me. Do you care about this set of characters? Are you connected to Nate and Elena and Sully and this group of people? Do you think that the Uncharted series has done a good job with that stuff that it's usually praised for?
Yeah, definitely. I do care about them. they do feel a little bit invincible, and that's maybe an aspect where you think, oh, their back is up against the wall again, but
sure,
I know they'll come through. And there's like a lot of fakes where it comes to like getting shot and deaths and things. And I maybe won't spoil that. Oh, it's an old game, I don't know. But anyway, it's good for that stuff. I think the story is really strong, and it's maybe one aspect where I think there's a lot more story-driven games coming out now that maybe weren't around in the same quantity when the first few Uncharted games were coming out. So like I think back then, as much as I wasn't into PlayStation or any story-driven games really, I think back then they stood head and shoulders above any other game story-driven wise. But now you've got like your Gods of War, the Horizon, Spider-Man, all these other games that have quite a big emphasis on plot that take loads of cues from a game like Uncharted, honestly. So I think it maybe hasn't aged in a way where it's like it's still head and shoulders above all the rest, but it's still, it's these other games wouldn't be what they are without it, kind of thing. Like it's a huge building block, and I think you will see that evolution when you play Last of Us and Uncharted 4. I feel like both those games are a huge step up in terms of the actual plot and stuff like that. I'm really looking forward to 4 because what was the gap between 3 and 4? Like it was a big hefty. It's pretty significant. Like 4 or 5 years or something. I can't remember. I think 4 is probably in terms of storytelling the best in the series. Yeah, really looking forward to it. And then obviously I've seen like graphically it just looks really cool. There's more open areas and things, and interested to see what they're like. So yeah. Uncharted 3, I'm continuing that journey. I'm really enjoying it. So great. Yeah, that's my number 5. Cool. My number 5, you already talked about. It is Nidhogg 2. Nice. Maybe I have this higher up my list because I was beating you and you weren't winning, so you put it further down. I mean, we already talked about it, but I think Nidhogg 2 is just a brilliant game. It is a twist on a formula, right? Like it is. I think the reason why we compare it to Smash Brothers is because Smash Brothers isn't really a fighting game, and Nidhogg isn't really a fighting game either. Like it's this weird run to the other side of the screen by killing your opponent and not getting killed in the process, and if you die, it swings back the other way. So it allows for this great momentum shifts, right? Like you have these moments where one player is just like taking you down, and you die, and you get to the very end of the last screen and you stop them, and then all of a sudden the momentum swings back the other way. And there were definitely matches where like you got right to the end and then I stopped you and I swung all the way back to my side. And those kind of moments that you can create, like where someone comes back. There's not other games that really do that in the same way, arguably. Sure, you can be like 4 stocks up in Smash Brothers or something, but that's kind of different. It is, yeah. It's different because like this game plays with space, and like it's not about health bars, it's about distance, right? Your distance is basically your health bar, but it's a health bar that can be replenished depending on how far and how good you are, right? Like there's never an instance where you can't turn it around, Exactly. Whereas I feel like to some degree in competitive games, you get to this point where you're like, well, I could play perfectly, but like the chances of me playing this perfectly are low. And like granted, that can still be the case with Nidhogg, definitely. But I feel like it gives you the leeway to have these wild swings that let you just get back into it. And I think it's so smart about the way it rotates through weapons as well, right? Like constantly giving you something different, because there are certain weapons that are better against others. It's almost a Fire Emblem like weapon triangle type thing. Yeah, and we can totally do a setting where you can like just do one weapon. Yes, give that a go. I think so. I think you can probably toggle it on and off. But for me, I like the approach of the randomness of it's not really random. Feels like a sequence. And like the longer the match goes, the more nonsense is on the field. And so you have these instances of like you're both in a deadlock, but there's like 2 bows and like a long sword and like a great sword on the ground. And I'm like picking up one, throwing one, jumping out of the way, ducking yours, like trying to hit you with another one. The idea that you can parry back at someone else and just like reflect it. It's so much fun. I really, and I know we've only had like 2 play sessions with it, but on the strength of that alone, this game is high up my list because it is just, it's so much fun. And it's, it's one I've been eyeing for years and years. It's also one of those rare instances where it's a multiplayer game that you can play online, which just
I don't know why more people don't do.
And it's so simple to set up. It's like, right, I'm going to play with my friends. Right, MZ's a friend. There he is. Right, he's online. Let's play. And you're in.
Yeah.
And it goes. And
there was no lag whatsoever. Like, it ran really smoothly. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really, really good, and it's a great game to just have whenever, wherever, to play with people. So yeah, Nidhogg, number 5 for me.
Nice. My number 4 is another VR game, is Beat Saber. Put lightsabers and Guitar Hero together, and it works fantastically well. Like, this game does what it says on the tin. Like, you have to experience it to really appreciate what I'm talking about here, but if you've ever as a child swung a sword or a lightsaber, and you know the satisfaction that feeling has, I think this game does that feeling justice. You know, like, it feels like you are slashing blocks near you, and obviously to a beat, and it works. It's really satisfying. I gave myself a cold by like playing this too much, because I was in that headset for like a solid 2-3 hours, just going ham, and like was drenched in sweat by the time I finished. And then the next day I was like, I'm not feeling well at all, because I pushed myself too hard on this game. But it's really good. One downside is the song list isn't the kind of music that I'm into, but that was very much remedied when KDA's pop stars, rock stars.
Yeah,
pop star. That song came to the system for free, to the game for free, which was a nice twist, complete with purple lightsabers. And now it's got like Panic at the Disco downloadable content that I might get at some point. But it just works. It is so fun to play, and I know that Greg Miller, like, he played this as like his way to get fit in 2018, and it's a sort of game that I would potentially be up for, just kind of over a summer, just like, I'm going to play 20 minutes, half an hour of this every morning, like, just to keep your movement going.
Here's what you do, Bally. It's like every morning you play Beat Saber, and every evening you play Ring Fit Adventure.
Oh man,
and that'll get you.
There you go. Exactly.
It's your workout plan. It's a gaming workout plan for 2020.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think of Beat Saber when you gave it a go, MBZ?
It's really cool, and I think it is one of those rare VR games that just, you don't have to worry about a lot of the concerns that VR has, because it is like you're stationary and you're just swinging things, right? So for most people, it's going to work. And also, like, this game is a game that's broken through. I was watching a video the other day that popped up on my YouTube recommended, but there was Jimmy Fallon versus Brie Larson in Beat Saber. Oh. And like, when that's a video that exists, you know that Beat Saber has kind of blown up beyond its VR sphere to some degree, right?
Yeah.
It is one of those games that it got famous because of GIFs on Twitter, and because it is so easy to just connect with it. It's like, oh shit, it's lightsabers, and it's a rhythm game, and it's in VR. It's like, okay, tick, 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 yes. A lot of people find that very appealing, and it's difficult, right? And I think one of the things I found a little tricky is just the signposting. Like, the arrows are not, like, they are small enough to where you can get confused, and the blue and red, you need to make sure you know which one is on which side, and you're sometimes in the harder songs crossing over, which makes my brain do backflips, and I can't deal with it. So like, when that was happening, I was like, I just don't know what is going on here, versus the easier modes, which, you know, it could be a Guitar Hero 3 thing where I was like, Bally's a god, and I'm like, I will never be that good, and then like I get it, and I eventually
you would pick it up if you gave it a good few hours of practice.
Probably.
But I totally get what you're saying. And like, I think if there were a Beat Saber 2, I think the one thing this game just needs is the licensing for a bunch of awesome songs, and like, that's just the area where it's got all these original beaty dance music songs that don't resonate a ton with me. There's a few of them that I do quite like now, and I don't know enough about music and licensing to know how they would even afford to do that, or who they'd probably need like to do some deal with Sony and become PSVR exclusive and do a big deal through Sony's funding or something to try and get music deals. Who knows? I don't know how that would work, but if there was a Beat Saber 2, they just need more songs, like more mainstream songs, that like rock songs, and I think that would be infinitely like my potential game of the year if it had like a better track list. But as it is, like, the music is fine, and it is about the lightsabers, it is about the beat, and it works, and I love it so much.
Totally. That's what I was going to say, is like, it's called Beat Saber, and a lot of those types of dance songs are driven by just a consistent like dun dun dun, you know, and I don't think you necessarily get that in other genres of music. It doesn't mean anything because you can always adapt, like
exactly,
like you know, people made Guitar Hero lines out of songs which didn't have guitars in them, right?
Precisely,
like it's very possible to just adapt to whatever
every song has a beat. It's just some songs emphasize that beat more than others, but so that's my number 4, Beat Saber. My number 4 is a game that came out at the end of last year, and I picked up in a sale and beat the very beginning this year, is Grease. The very, very good-looking, painterly platformer art game, whatever you want to call it, really. It's a game that surprised me a lot because I think going into it, I'd heard mixed things. Like, there are certain people who didn't quite connect with it. Like, I think Patrick Lepig was talking about how he felt nothing from it. Like it was one of those games where it's like kind of like a journey, but it didn't actually end up making the same impact as that type of game did for him. And I'll agree with him. Like I didn't really have an emotional punch from it, but I think the elements of this game are so well crafted and so well considered that I didn't necessarily need that, really. It's far more of a video game than I thought it was, in terms of you get power-ups, right? Like one of the earliest things that happens is you're going through this desert area and there's sand that blows you and knocks you on your feet and you can't get through, and you get this power-up that literally turns you into like this concrete block, and it's really interesting as a kind of something to be opposite of what your character actually is, because your character is very flowing and very ethereal, and then suddenly she transforms into this like really giant block, and like her legs go like very small underneath, and you're like walking along. It's almost comedic in a way, but it works. I don't know. It's one of those things that I was very surprised to see, and as soon as that happened, and also like the jumping feels nice. Like it feels really good. One of the first things I did, because it starts out very artsy and like you fall from this great height down to the floor, and you're walking along very slowly. You know, it's one of those sequences that is you can only go so fast, and eventually it breaks you out of it. And I was like moving back and forward, and I was like going left and right and turning on a dime and like jumping, and I was like, oh, this actually feels really good to play, which I usually that type of game you don't expect from. And it continues to build on its mechanics, and it does things with like being underwater. There's some gravity stuff where you flip upside down. Like it really has a great sense of progression, and also just takes you to these really lush, wonderful places. And this idea of bringing color back to the world, making the environment more vibrant as you go. It's very clever as a concept, and yeah, it has a meaning and a message, or it's one of those stories that you can kind of interpret as you will. I wasn't that engaged by that aspect of it, but I think it is like musically well considered and visually so resplendent that it just had a big impact on me, and I enjoyed it a considerable amount. Thought it was just a very well crafted experience. And definitely worth playing for anyone. It's also, I would say, as you were kind of chatting about Journey in the previous segment, it is a game that you could, it's more of a 2-sitting game, right? It's like 4 to 5 hours long. Enough. So, but it falls into that range where it's like a weekend game. You know, you can just kind of get through it and have come away with something. So, Grease, my number 4. Well, talking of Journey is my number 3. I obviously have talked a lot about this game earlier in this episode.
Well, it must have made such an impact to be this high up.
Yeah, definitely. And
I was wondering that, right? Because like I did play it so long ago, and the gaming landscape has changed so much, and like there have been things inspired by this game, and there are like the entire independent industry has gone to places like this, and there are also games that have social messages, like one of your favorite games, Night in the Woods, you know, games that are not directly like traditional video games. They're trying to say something different, trying to do something different. So I just wondered how much of an impact Journey would have on someone today playing it for the first time.
I mean, Night in the Woods totally is one of my favorite games of all time, honestly. Like, it's really, really high, and in terms of like a game that's not overly gamery, I guess is the best way I can describe it.
Sure.
It's maybe my number 1 in that sense. So Journey's not quite on that echelon. It's certainly in my mind at this point in time. Like I only played this weekend, and like
Right.
so it's quite hard to put it at 3. Like it could have been higher, it could have been lower. Like it just kind of felt at this point in time 3 was a good slot for this, and yeah, it works. And it's funny how you say like it's not a very gamery game, but in the sense that like it's about scaling a mountain, and then obviously you've had a game like God of War where the whole story is like about scaling a mountain, and even though it's a very different game, obviously there is still so many moments in God of War where it is about the camera angle and looking to that peak and looking at the goal, and you constantly get that with a game like Journey. So like I think there's loads of smaller parts of this game that other studios and things have been like, oh, that maybe that could work. Or I'm not saying it's directly linked, but obviously like,
well, you know, Journey was a huge deal when it came out. I'm sure its influence has been felt in a lot of games. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Cory Barlog played Journey and was like, oh, that's cool, and kind of took ideas from it, you know.
For sure. So yeah, it's number 3 on my list, and I had an absolute blast with that game. So yeah,
great.
Nbz.
My number 3 is a game that like got so fucking overlooked, and I'm so glad that I finally played it. Sunset motherfucking Overdrive. Wow, I was blown away by how much fun I had with this game. It really is like the best traversal I have played in a long, long time. Now, I don't think it's maybe as fluid as something like Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man is a game that empowers you with its traversal, and like that's its own brand of fun. But Sunset Overdrive traversal is like the fun that you make on your own, right? It's the entire world is crafted around being able to wall run on buildings, pogo off cars, slide on like telephone lines, either over them or under them, air dash, grind on rails. Like it's kind of a open world Tony Hawk game, but more of a platformer and focused obviously around combat as well. And the entire premise of like fighting enemies while constantly being on the move, and having weapons that make sense with that. Like a lot of the weapons have either a homing thing to them or an auto lock, or a way that it's much easier for you to aim and hit them, because when you're moving, obviously aiming is a lot more difficult, and it's going to be more likely you're not going to hit things. So they really built the game around that stuff. And the entire world is literally a playground. It's funny because so many of the objects in this game, you look at them and you're like, that's not how that should work. But like, there's a cartoonishness to it that makes the world this unique thing, right? Like being able to bounce off cars as if they're trampolines, or the same with like umbrellas that like cover tables or with chairs around them. Like there are so many regular life things that they just twist and make different, and like you can even skid along water, you know, like there's a move that eventually you unlock where you're able to do that and then bounce off boats, and it's constantly about never stopping, right? Like that is the MO of Sunset Overdrive, is you have to be on the move and not worry about if you're running past, because enemies are like littered on the map, and you get stuff for killing them that's a currency that you can then spend on new weapons. And in traditional Insomniac fashion, the weapons are just fucking wild in this game. There's a gun that shoots vinyl records, there's a teddy bear rocket launcher, there's like just so much insanity going on in terms of the variety and the different things you use. There's a shotgun, which I mentioned when I talked about the game on the podcast, that's literally a cock and balls. It's like very juvenile in its humor, and I think a lot of people will bounce off of it because of some of the meme-ridden humor. I don't think it was really that bad in terms of that stuff. I actually kind of enjoyed a lot of the humor. And
when did it come out?
It was 2014, I believe. This was one of the first major Xbox One games, like exclusives.
Do you think it came out at a time and was overlooked partly because of like open world fatigue at the time, or? No,
I think it was overlooked because the Xbox One was shitting bricks at the time, right? Like I think it was just the console was in such a bad place. The messaging, like Don Matrick had only just been let go, and like Phil Spencer was just starting to try to turn things around, and not many people owned Xboxes. It was a new IP, right? It was from a veteran developer, but it was a game that, you know, by all accounts, didn't seem like it was something that would connect with people for whatever reason. but playing it, you realize like exactly what they were going for and what they wanted to achieve. And I feel like Spider-Man would not have been as good as it was were it not for Sunset Overdrive and were it not for a lot of the lessons they learned about environmental traversal. Because even Spider-Man, a lot of wall running stuff, like I can trace that back to what they do in Sunset.
They learned to move to the more popular system as well.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, like I mean, you know, Spider-Man has to feel a certain way, it has to look a certain way, and it has to have an ease of accessibility to the widest possible audience, which it does. Sunset Overdrive is what happens when you take a traversal system and build an entire game around it, like not just getting from place to place, but combat and exploration, and like literally every aspect is built around these mechanics, and it's so much fun. It is just a romp, and I think it is testament to how enjoyable this game was that after I finished it, I considered going and collecting everything. I didn't do that, obviously, because I didn't have time to just fucking collect every nonsense, like, smelly sock on a rail in the open world.
He says completing the Pokedex and...
Yeah, well, you know, it's a different thing. But I did jump back in because on Game Pass, the DLC was there as well. So I played through all the DLC as well, and had a great time with it. It has some really good boss fights too, some really great, like, spectacle-style things that... were so much fun and really pop. The game is color abounding, like talking about Grease and talking about Ni no Kuni, like games that have color in them. Obviously, you know, we're a Nintendo podcast, that speaks to us, but Sunset Overdrive is bursting with color just all over the shop. It's a gorgeous game, has a great aesthetic, and yeah, like I liked a lot of the dialogue and I liked a lot of the characters, as weird and kooky as it was. It's definitely fourth wall breaking stuff, but it was great fun, and I could not recommend it highly enough. I thought I was blown away by how much I enjoyed it, because it was a game that I'd been like, bring this game to PC, like I'm interested in it. It's an Insomniac game. It's fantastic. It was so underappreciated in its time, and people need to play it. They really do. So
very good.
That's my pitch on play fucking Sunset Overdrive. Do it. Okay, number 2, Bally, let's go.
My number 2 is another game I played in Japan earlier this year, and that is Cuphead.
Okay, nice.
God, what more can you say about this game? So it's almost like the art style brings you in, and then the gameplay like is so addictive that it just keeps you there, like keeps you hooked.
Totally,
like it is
yes.
So the second you die, all you want to do is face that boss again. And I love the emphasis on boss fights. I know there's a handful of like regular stages elsewhere in the game, and they're fine. And I think I played all of them bar one. Like I even missed like the last one because I was just so focused on the boss fights, and they are by far and away the best bit.
Wait, you can skip those?
Yeah, like I mean, because I think you get like the currency from them, and using the currency you buy the power ups. And as long as you have the power ups that you want, you don't really need to.
Sure, like if you're just relying on one gun in particular, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So God, this game, like the art style constantly surprises you with like the new designs of new bosses, like from the start of the game right till the end. Like I was constantly pleasantly surprised by, wow, that just looks great.
Like that's a reward in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the reward is just seeing the transformation almost, and
Yeah.
like you have motivation to get further in the fight just because you want to see how ridiculous the animations are and what happens to the boss.
And so often we talk about the spectacle of boss fights when it's to do with the scale, like whether that's just Sunset Overdrive, like you just said, or something like Astro Bot, or Zelda. So it's like that boss was incredible because of the scale. Whereas
like God of War, like
God
that
of
fight,
War, wow,
you know?
the scale of that fight. Whereas Cuphead, it's like that boss fight was incredible because of the art style, like because of how that boss looked. And that's something I find I certainly say less about certain games and bosses and things like it. And this game just constantly keeps that aspect fresh. I think like it is hilarious that this game was first revealed in like a reel of Xbox games coming out at the time, and everyone was like, whoa, what was that? I need more of that. And I think there's like DLC now coming out for this game, and
I think it's 2020 at some point it'll come. Yeah,
and it's the kind of game that you really want a sequel, and like just a whole host of new bosses with that art style. And It's just so solid. I mean, I even played the last 3-4 bosses with a dodgy Joy-Con, which I would not recommend for this game.
No, sounds like a nightmare.
But even with that, I really enjoyed the end of this game, and it's a really, really special game. Really cool, and
the fact that it's on Switch is crazy also.
So glad it came to Switch. It runs like a dream on Switch. Maybe some of the loading screens are a tad longer, but it's nothing bad at all. And God, that was a fun game to play in Japan.
Did you play it mainly handheld then because you were traveling?
Yeah, this trip to Japan, I didn't even bother bringing the dock, I believe. I just went handheld, and that's something I've kind of started to do a bit more. Yeah,
because I haven't actually seen it running on a Switch screen, but I imagine it's really the type of game that will shine on that.
I'm constantly just surprised generally by playing games on the Switch screen that you see on the TV. Like, that looks good, but then wow, it actually looks really clear, really crisp on the screen. And Cuphead, it looks great, looks fantastic.
Awesome.
Definitely play it if you haven't yet.
Yeah, I think most people have at this point, right? Like now that it's so much more accessible to people, especially our audience, right? Like Switch owning people.
Yeah, definitely.
So cool. My number 2 is The Gardens Between.
Nice.
This game really blew my mind, and I was interested in it for a long, long time. And I remember watching the quick look and being like, oh, this is a really cool concept of like, you know, it's all based around time and your actions. Some actions you're able to reverse and others you can kind of leave there. This game is just so smart. It is absolutely one of the best puzzle games I've ever played. And it's just the way that it introduces all these ideas. Every level feels so bespoke and handmade and just an idea that is never reused again. Like it has that feel to it where it brings in these new mechanics and it's this one-time thing. And figuring out the logic of it, the way that it is weaved together and the how clever you feel after accomplishing each of those little moments is brilliant. It's a remarkably well-made game, and I think it also it has this unique style to it. It's this rotational diorama that is kind of unlike anything I've seen in terms of the way that it's self-contained. Like each level you move around an area and it uses that perspective in clever ways to tease things that you're gonna have to do in the future or to see where something goes to. As you move forward, things will like jump around and move to certain places, and you're like, okay, well, this lamp is going to jump here and then here, so I need to put the light into it here, move forward, it goes there, then I need to hit this thing, so then it will stay there, then I can pick it up and get past this block. And I think it also does a really good job of segmenting you, right? So when there are a lot of elements in each stage, and so sometimes it could get overwhelming, but what the game smartly does is once you get past a certain point, it checkpoints you in a way that's not really an obvious checkpoint, but you can't go back in time. You can't go back across that bridge because it will stop you from going there, which means that you know everything you need is already in front of you. Like there's no grander thing that you need to go all the way back to the beginning for. And I think that stops a lot of the confusion that you might have or frustration that you might have with a puzzle game like this. I think I already mentioned when we talked about on the show like some of the individual puzzles that it does and the cleverness that it employs, but it is constantly evolving, constantly showing you new ideas, and it's just really, really nice. It has incredible animation. Like there are some stages where it's like raining, and so like going slowly back in time, and the fact that you have the control over, you're not controlling the characters, you're controlling the flow of time. So the movement of the analog stick, depending on how fast you move it, how slow you move it, the way it rotates backwards and forwards, it just looks incredible. So it has that going for it as well. It is available on Switch, and I would recommend that people check it out because it is a very short game, but it is remarkably dense, filled with ideas, and just joyous on so many levels. Absolutely fantastic. The Gardens Between is my number 2.
Do you think it would run okay on Switch? I know there's a version on there.
I've heard that it does, yeah.
Okay.
I've heard that it's a decent version there. It's not going to... It's probably 30 as opposed to 60, but I don't think that matters too much.
It's just when you said rain, I was like, oh god.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, exactly.
I don't know.
No, I feel like it doesn't matter too much in a game like this. Obviously, it will look much better if you play it on like PC, like I did, but that's not necessarily the be-all, end-all of the experience. I think the experience of the joy of puzzle solving.
It's not an action game, so that always helps if there's a bit of stutter or something. So.
Yeah. So well worth checking out. Gardens Between. Loved it.
Right, number 1, my game of the year that didn't actually come out this year is Horizon Zero Dawn.
Boo fucking boo! No.
Nbz's not a fan.
No.
And, this game had a lot that it had to do to impress me following playing Breath of the Wild the year before. 2 years before, I guess, now at this stage.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking at this game in terms of the world and the diversity of the world, it's nowhere near Breath of the Wild in terms of that aspect. That's one area of this game that is slightly more flat. Where I think this game far exceeds a game like Breath of the Wild is in its combat and in its story, especially the story. For me, it just really, really resonated. The flow of working out where these machines came from, why you have this caveman style culture, and how that all links together, where you're mixing technology with almost a prehistoric vibe to the game. I think that comes together in a really satisfying way, and I think that as the combat is actually really cool in the sense that I think the design of the beasts that are attacking you, both large and small, are incredibly well animated, and some of them are just so vicious that you're fighting for your life a lot of the time with this game, and that's not really something I've felt in a lot of games, like combat games. I guess I'm doing it a lot right now in Jedi Fallen Order, but you constantly feel like you're one big beast away from dying, and that's not really a feeling I always got in the same way in other open world games. I guess early on in Zelda there's a lot of big beasts out there that will munch you, but Horizon, you feel that right until the end of the game, honestly, because the scale of the beasts constantly gets bigger and bigger, and you might feel like you're well equipped, but ultimately, you don't actually gain a ton in terms of ramping up your defenses. There's a lot to offer in terms of ramping up your offenses, but not your defense in the same way. And for that reason, it's a lot more about your skill in dodging and shooting and setting up traps and concocting bombs and potions and these sorts of things. There's a real density of stuff to collect and things you can build. And there's just so many ways that you can take down enemies that it constantly was interesting to me how you did that. And I spent a good 40, 50 hours with this game. I could have easily gone 70, 80, 90. There's so much to do with this game. And at times you can kind of realize, am I actually making a profit in the resources I'm getting here? And what I mean by that is you get resources from defeating beasts, but at the same time you have to use resources to defeat beasts. So sometimes you might have played for 2-3 hours getting from point A to B, defeated however many beasts, and then you realize, oh, actually I don't think I've made a great profit in terms of my resources that I've had. But it's just a really interesting system that this game offers in that sense. And I know you've got issues with the combat Nbz and things, and I agree the bow and arrow as a weapon doesn't feel as good as a game like, I don't know, Breath of the Wild or something. But for me, it's a lot more about the nature of the combat and the big beast charging at you and dodging, getting in slashes, the stealth involved, especially on some of the smaller beasts. You can one-shot a lot of beasts. I really enjoyed all that stuff. And again, the story, I've never really gotten into many sci-fi stories before, and there's something about this story that just really resonated with me, the reveals, and there's a good number of reveals that come gradually, especially near the end of the game, and it sets up nicely for a sequel. And I'm just totally in on this world and Aloy and all the characters in and around that. I just think it's all really great, and I'm was very pleased to play this game earlier this year.
I I'm just gonna respect your choice and just not say anything. We're not here to shit on things, like this is our favorite games of the year.
I mean, people know your criticisms of this game, Nbz. It's not a secret, but yeah.
No, it's not. But I respect that you enjoy this game. It definitely has elements that I enjoyed. I think for me, like the first 6-7 hours, I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I really like this.
But like the animation of the big beast, would you say, is that one of the points that you'd say is unique or good about this game?
Yeah, like there's some good stuff with that, the scale and things like that. And I do think just the landscapes look really nice. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't think this game really needed to be an open world game, I think is my fundamental issue. It was trying to tell a story. It was trying to have a linear narrative. And I basically just ran from thing to thing. I really don't think an open world benefits this game in any significant way, aside from like building out the idea that it's a world, right?
I think having watched the what's the documentary guy? Oh my god, my brain is
No Clip.
No Clip did a great documentary on this game, and like it's clear that the developers wanted to have secrets to explore that were optional, like the cauldrons and understanding how the beasts came about and that sort of thing. And it's harder to incorporate secrets, I would argue, into a more linear game in the same way, arguably. But
sure,
I totally see what you're saying. And yeah, you can play this game in a very linear format as you've described, and you will get, in my view, you will get about 80% of all the great stuff in this game, to be honest. Like, it's one of those games where you can skip a lot of the side stuff, and certainly in my view, the best parts are those big combat sequences and the narrative, and you're going to get almost all of that if you mainline it. So like it's not a game, and that's why I did play it in like 30-40 hours rather than 50-60. Like I could have gone longer, and it was just a case like I didn't play the DLC, for example, because I was satisfied that the best part for me was that narrative, and it had reached a good conclusion and set up the next game in a way that I didn't think the DLC was going to touch on. I mean, I could be wrong in that, and maybe I should go back and play that DLC at some point, but like it kind of did what I wanted it to do.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like they could improve a lot for a sequel.
Yeah,
definitely. I'm interested to see what they do with a sequel, and kind of what changes they make and things like that. It's
because it was definitely a studio who'd never made like an open world game or anything.
Totally, yeah. And I appreciate that they've gone from Killzone to this, and it's a huge jump. And for the most part, they've done a very good job with it. So I respect that.
I mean, the game actually started as mechanical dinosaurs in a natural world, and then the whole story was written from that, which is just like mind-boggling that you would start with like you wouldn't go the other way around, like. So, and honestly, the narrative, in my view at least, doesn't feel shoehorned into that starting point, even though you kind of like look back and think, oh right, okay, that does make sense, I guess. But we'll see.
Well, I mean, it's the difference between the design philosophy of these types of studios, right? It's like they come up with the idea for the world and story before they even have gameplay mechanics. And for me, that tends to not produce games that I enjoy as much mechanically, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love Uncharted, but it's like, it's fine. It's an action game, right? Like, it's...
Well, I mean, this game was, like, I should say, like, it was designed mechanical dinosaurs in this world that you were going to hunt, and then it was the story. So they had... I'm not saying they went mechanics first, they didn't, but they went for a concept first, and then...
I mean, that's what I was saying, like world, right?
Yeah,
like world and setup and stuff like that. Whereas Nintendo are like, I don't know, here's an idea for this thing, let's make the character a tofu block while we're testing it out, and then we'll figure out what to slap on it,
Yeah, totally.
It's just a different thought process.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
And now I should also say, like, the guy... Who's the Dutch guy who headed up this...
Herman Hulst.
He's now the head of
formerly
Sony.
the head of Guerrilla, who is now president of SIE, or Worldwide Studios. He's the head of Worldwide Studios, is what he is now. Taking over from Shuhei Yoshida.
It's the EU taking over the world.
Yeah, Jim Ryan, fucking Conquest. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Okay. Anything else to say about Horizon?
It's good. I'm looking forward to the sequel. Hopefully it comes with a launch of the PS5.
The number one game of the year, it's good.
It's good. It's a good game.
My number one is a game that I kept telling myself throughout the whole year, don't forget how much you love this game, because you love this game, and I know it's going to get to the end of the year and it's been 7-8 months and you will have forgotten. And granted, like, there are elements that I have forgotten about the game, but I remember just loving playing this game. My number one is Hyper Light Drifter. This game feels incredible to play. I think it's the first time I've really connected with a game that leans into a Souls style of combat, and it's not the same at all. But it really is. It's the approach of the Zelda type game that we talked about, where it's more built on the lineage of Zelda 1 than the kind of dungeon based, like Link to the Past onward style. It's more Breath of the Wild in that sense, because you start out and you can go in one of 4 directions, and you can make that decision yourself. Like, it doesn't have an impact. And I actually went to the hardest section first. Like, I looked online and people are like, oh, don't go there first, go there last. But I went there first, and it was challenging, and I relish that challenge. I found it so incredibly satisfying, because so much of this game is about dashing and attacking and understanding enemy patterns and how they will come at you, right? It's the type of thing that Jedi Fallen Order tries to do, but kind of fumbles, like doesn't quite nail the combat, whereas Hyper Light Drifter feels perfectly tuned in terms of what enemies are going to do, their attack animations, how you can hit them, how many times, and then you dash away and dash back in. And that momentum of combat, of hitting enemies and using your health packs, and like health packs being a really valuable resource that you find things in the environment, you're like, oh, thank God I've got another health pack or something like that. It really adds stakes, and it makes the game so engaging in terms of the feel and the momentum and the movement as you explore it. And the game has lots of secrets, like it's kind of riddled with that stuff, and you'll find these little icons that are kind of flashing on the ground, and they're very subtle in terms of their design. So for me, I'm not the sort of person who goes after that type of stuff, but I was fascinated by trying to find things in this world and uncovering areas that would give me an upgrade to my sword or something that I could take back to the village, or a currency and that I would use to unlock moves or whatever. And as you go through, like, each area feels so well designed in terms of its enemy placement. There are platforming things that are interesting, and like little mini puzzles that you have to hit switches. It's not the level of puzzle solving that you would find in a Zelda style game, because it is so much more action focused, but I appreciate that it is in that sense. Like, it takes that thread that is much stronger and knows that the game is good at that, and so it doesn't try and do anything that's too far out of that purview. I think the game is just stronger as a result of its focus on what it excels in. And so, like, that first boss that I faced maybe took me 12, 13 tries to beat, but every time I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, I understand the movement patterns now. I can definitely figure out this is the opportune moment to slide in here and get a hit. Then I need to dash away. Then I need to hide in this corner. He's going to do this move. Like, I'm just learning the patterns and the quick reactions, the dexterity. It's just, the feel is brilliant, and the just satisfaction of overcoming challenges is immense. I found it so rewarding as a gameplay loop. I think also just visually it's really distinct. It has this pixel art style that isn't quite like a lot of things that I've seen. I think it distinguishes itself from a 16-bit or an 8-bit look. It feels completely different from any of those types of games. And I think just some of the animation in terms of the trails you leave behind when you're moving around, and some of the enemies, it just has a complete cohesion to all aspects, and it kind of just molds itself around it really, really spectacularly. Just had a blast with it. Definitely a game that I recommend people check.
It's also out on
Switch as well. Yes, it's one of those funny things. A lot of these games on my list, I played them on PC, but you can play them on Switch. So it. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it, other than I just had such an enjoyable time. And like, I was playing this at the same time as Devil May Cry 5, and I'm like, man, I'm in heaven right now. These two action games that are, one is 2D, one is 3D, they're both hitting me really hard, and I'm loving playing both of them. But Hyper Light Drifter is just, it's remarkably good. And I didn't think I would like it that much because it isn't the type of game I usually gravitate towards when it comes to these sort of experiences. You know, I'm much more focused on the puzzle aspect of Zelda games, but this is like a Zelda game that doubles down on combat and is better for it, which I didn't expect
Nice.
when I came to it. So
Yeah, I need to check that one out for sure.
yeah, I think you were a bit skeptical about it as well in terms of like I don't think you gravitate towards that stuff either.
Yeah.
But it is so well made. It's so excellently done. I loved it. I think it's a great game, and that's why it's my number one. Because it's really good.
Shall we quickly run through our list then?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Sure. So my number 10 was Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. My number 9 was Luigi's Mansion. My number 8 was Nidhogg 2. Number 7, Moss. Number 6, Wave Race 64. Number 5, Uncharted 3. Number 4, Beat Saber. Number 3, Journey. Number 2, Cuphead. And number 1, Horizon Zero Dawn.
All right, and my number 10 was Ni no Kuni 2. Number 9 was Luigi's Mansion. Number 8 was Daigyakuten Saiban. Number 7 was Battle Chef Brigade. Number 6 was Soul Calibur 6. Number 5 was Nidhogg 2. Number 4 was Grease. Number 3 was Sunset Overdrive. Number 2 was The Gardens Between. And number 1 was Hyper Light Drifter. Weird year, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. For me in particular, I think my list is very eclectic and full of games that are not necessarily what I would generally play in a given year, which I think speaks to the thing that I like about, you know, where we are with video games now is like you can really go out of your comfort zone and find things that you really connect with that you wouldn't necessarily expect to.
There's a really high quality of games that no one talks about. As in, like, there's a lot of games that are very high quality that just never make it into reviews or whatever.
Like, just look at my top three. My top three are like games that people are like, yeah, these were good, but like they're great. Like, they're fan-fucking-tastic games.
Yeah.
It's
Totally.
a shame that they don't get as much light shot onto them.
And that's just to do right now with the strength of the industry and just the amount
Totally,
of good
yeah.
smaller stuff. Like, it's
Right,
just
because
huge.
would I have put Sunset Overdrive on a Game of the Year list if I played it in 2014? I mean, I probably would have done because I fucking loved it, but I feel like these types of games get overlooked in the year they come out, and so it's nice when we do these lists because it gives games that may not have gotten the limelight in their particular year of release a chance to shine, just because we're playing them whenever.
Shall we
which is really
very
cool.
quickly run through just a few games that didn't make the list?
Yeah, sure. Give me some of yours that didn't quite
Super
make
Hot
it.
VR. I love that game, but
Oh, yeah.
there are better VR games, and like there's some frustrations that come from it. Although when that game's at its best, it is very, very good. Undertale, I've talked about that before as well. Just
Oh, you
my
played that
issues
this
with that.
year, didn't
yeah,
you?
played Undertale
Wow, I thought that
this
was
year.
last year.
Yeah, Golf Peaks. That's a cool little puzzle game. Just didn't quite make the list. Star Wars Battlefront Rogue One VR Mission. I didn't think I could put a single mission in the list, but if I could, I probably would have.
Look,
because
okay,
it is
if we-
really cool.
If we're talking about wildest fucking experiences of the year, that's my number one.
Yeah.
Like, God.
I've got Pokemon Sun in there. I enjoyed it. I don't know. I just didn't quite make the top 10. Ink. That was a fun game. Nothing overly special in my mind, but it was cool. Eagle Flight, that's a very good VR game. Again, didn't quite make it. If you want a game that is flight simulator in VR, it's the best, cheapest version to do that, I think. It's a really cool game. Then Super Castlevania 4, I struggled with that game. It was hard. But and then Star Fox 2, which is... It's good. It's fine. It's not going to make a top 10, but I enjoyed it.
Cool. I have 4 games that were kind of vying for like my number 10 spot that kind of didn't make it. One is Sushi Striker, a game that
I thought that might be up here.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Sushi Striker a lot. I think it is... So, Alex Kalafi, who used to host a lot of Nintendo World Report podcasts, he was tweeting about how he picked up Sushi Striker and he's like, he beat it in a really short space of time, like a week or something, and he was like, man, it's just all so samey, like you keep doing the same thing, like it... And for me, that spoke to the problem with this game is it's not a game you burn through. It's a game you pick up and put down, right? Like, I beat this game over the course of, similar to Ni no Kuni, like 2 or 3 months, because it was like, yeah, let's play this for 20 minutes. And then I'm like, okay, I've had my fill. Because ultimately, a lot of the fights you take part in are kind of the same. Like, they throw in elements that are different, but it is, the fundamentals of Sushi Striker is it's always going to be that style of thing, and like collecting plates and throwing them, and it's really satisfying. It's a really well made game, and like it has more budget than it likely should have. It has these full-blown anime cutscenes that are they're among some of the funniest things actually this year in games for me. Just this ridiculous nonsense that happens, and it's well written. Like, it's one of those rare instances of a Nintendo game that is voice acted in a hammy way that works and is funny and sharp and well written, but also just completely off the rails and weird. And I think a lot of Nintendo games could learn from that approach. I think Kid Icarus is one that kind of goes the comedy route and comes out better for it. So yeah, I'd like to see more of Nintendo doing that stuff. What Remains of Edith Finch? Really good game. Very, very engaging. Again, it's another 2-hour experience. I'm giving you a list here, Bally, of games that you can finish very quickly. Like Gardens Between is similar to that as well. Mm-hmm. But What Remains of Edith Finch is very cool because it is constantly changing up the gameplay. Like, the variety in that game is just staggering in terms of the different things it has you do, the way it tells the stories of all these different people in the Finch family, this house you're exploring. Yeah, it's very unique, and like the one level in particular that I think like Mark Brown talked about in terms of narrative and gameplay, and I think Giant Bomb brought it up in the year that it came out as well. Even though I knew it was coming and I knew what was happening, it still is remarkably well done. Like, it's just excellent from that perspective, and really, really clever. It's interesting because Giant Sparrow is the studio that made this game, and I was telling you about this on WhatsApp, but like them and that game company are similar because Sony were doing this thing during the PS3 generation where they were bringing like these indie studios into Santa Monica and like fostering them and like helping them develop their games, and they made like these 3-game deals with them. So that game company made Flow and Flower and Journey. Those are the 3 games that game company made. And then Giant Sparrow came in and they made The Unfinished Swan, which is a game I tried to play on PS3 but couldn't get through because it made me wildly motion sick, like horribly motion sick. But Sony then kind of ended that program, and so their 3-game deal kind of fell through.
They've got some other smaller stuff coming that was on their last, I'm going to say it again, their last Sony Direct.
Yeah, but like that's not the same thing as they were doing here.
Sure.
That's
I believe
much
that
more...
other stuff was in-house, though.
I don't think so. I think a lot of that stuff is just them taking indie studios. Like the one indie studio they actually bought recently was Pixel Opus, who do Concrete Genie.
Right.
But a lot of the stuff that they were promoting was like similar to Nintendo Direct. Like, Nintendo doesn't have publishing involvement, but they're just promoting it on their kind of state of play thing, But What Remains of Edith Finch is interesting because I think it's very different from Unfinished Swan, but it still has that same thread of like doing a narrative game, but in a very unique way and a unique approach. And I thought it was very well done. And then Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Seasons, which is probably the best Game Boy Zelda for me.
Above Minish Cap, or like I guess in Game
No, I
Boy?
mean Game Boy. Yeah,
Right.
Game Boy, original Game Boy. Yeah, I like it more than Link's Awakening. And having played Link's Awakening Remake, Oracle of Seasons is much better in terms of it's like...
You did not like Eagle's Tower.
No, well, like, the thing with Link's Awakening is it was revolutionary to make a game of that scale on Game Boy, but the Oracle games learned from it in significant ways. I think Seasons much more than Ages. Ages is a bit too fucking convoluted for its own good. But Seasons feels like the puzzle design is smarter. The dungeons have a better balance in terms of that stuff and enemy encounters. It does some interesting overworld stuff with how you change the seasons. I think it has an interesting story in terms of like you have this entire underground area with this different race of people, and the way that you're constantly going back there and unlocking new areas there. It's almost a proto tower from Spirit Tracks / fucking Phantom Hourglass that you go to. Like, you keep going back to that area and you slowly unlock more parts of it. I thought Oracle of Seasons was excellent. It's really well done, and I enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, it didn't quite make it. And then I'd also like to give a shout out to Elite Beat Agents, which is a game that has a very big cult following. and a game that I had heard of for years and years and had not tried. And I finally did, and I enjoyed it a lot. I think it gets brutally difficult near the end. Like, it definitely, like that last song, I sat there for like an hour and a half to 2 hours to get through that one song. So hearing that again and again and again, like, I think there's a weakness to it in terms of it is a little bit too tricky, but that is kind of the point of the game. It's like mastering those songs and like learning the patterns, and the rhythm and the touchscreen stuff works excellently. And it's got some good tracks in there. Like, they're all covers, but they're good songs. And they're the type of music, like, it's the kind of stuff that we're into, you know? Like,
Nice.
there's fucking like Blink-182 stuff in there, pop punky stuff, but also like, you know, 90s music, 80s music. It's all well chosen stuff that fits into the weirdness that game goes for. Similar to Sushi Striker and its kind of approach to storytelling, and very, very Japanese in that way.
Nice.
So yeah, those are a few that didn't quite make it for me. Obviously, there are fucking loads of games that I played this year that didn't make the list, but you know, I'm not going to talk about Destiny 2 here, because fucking who cares about that shit. Anyway, that's going to wrap us up. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll have some more podcasts coming soon, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Bally, do you want to give people another heads up as to what is to come in the next few weeks over December?
Yes, you are currently listening to the first of 6 podcasts across December here at TNL. So the next 2 episodes will be on December the 16th. That will be our Nintendo Game of the Year. That's a Patreon exclusive TNL Ranks episode. That'll be $2. December the 16th will also be our Jedi Fallen Order spoiler cast. Following that, Monday the 21st of December. Oh, it's not going to be a Monday, actually. That's just going to be the 21st of December. Is the Star Wars
Saturday, I believe.
Saturday is 21st December. Star Wars Episode 9 spoiler cast. Then Monday the 23rd of December, we've got our Game of the Year Part 2. So that's going to be our top 10 games that came out on Nintendo systems. The 25th, on Christmas Day, Nbz is going to bring you his top 100 games of all time. That's the podcast version of this video series he has just put out. And finally, December the 30th, we've got our Mandalorian spoiler cast. So episode 5 has just come out of that. So by that time, we'll have watched it all and can give you our thoughts.
Absolutely. So it's jam-packed, full of stuff. And hopefully you'll have some time to listen to it over the Christmas break and enjoy all the different podcasting that we are doing. So yeah, let's close out the show then. Bally, where can people find you across the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And you should also follow the podcast Twitter account, which is at TNL Podcast. And that's the best place to go to find this long list that I just told you. If you can't remember all those dates and times and things, definitely.
Yeah, it's pinned to the top of our profile, so you can.
We've got a graphic pinned that you can quickly have a look at for this festive season.
Absolutely. You can find me on the internet at Lord NBZ. And obviously we are in various places. We have a Patreon, which if you want to hear our thoughts on video games that weren't on Nintendo systems that came out this year, then go ahead and go over there at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. And we'd like to thank some patrons before we go.
Yes, thank you to our 2 $10 tier patrons. They are my fiancée Caroline and Atari Alex. Thank you for your support. And yes, as MBZ said, for $2 you can support the show, and we'll get that Nintendo Game of the Year podcast next Monday. And thank you to all our other patrons as well who support us. It's hugely appreciated, especially with Christmas coming up.
Yeah. So yes, and you can also find the show all across the expanse of the internet. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes, we're on TuneIn. All the services.
If the listeners could give you a Christmas present, MBZ, what would it be?
A great Christmas present, Bally, would be a review on iTunes. That would be wonderful.
I couldn't have said that better myself.
I would love that. We haven't had one in a little while. So if you want to brighten our day, if it's a 1-star review, don't do that. Just go and do something else. But yeah, if it's a 5-star review, please go ahead. I'd love that. That'd be really nice. That'd be a very good Christmas present to close out the year. I would appreciate it. So yeah, you can head over there. I think it's Apple Podcasts now or whatever, but you know, you'll find it. It takes not too long. I remember...
Your reviews will appear on all other sorts of websites that take those iTunes reviews, and so it all goes to helping the show.
Absolutely. Good stuff. So, yeah, that's going to close us out, I believe. We have a lot of things to watch and play and podcast about, so it's going to be... It's going to be a season, and also, the Game Awards is coming, and also you're going to be staying up for the elections. There's
election.
Lots of things happening, but yes, it's going to be a fun time. So join us for it, and we'll see you guys very soon. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. The musical interludes used on today's show were The Dark World from Cadence of Hyrule, copyright Brace Yourself Games and Nintendo 2019, and Apotheosis from Journey, copyright That Game Company 2012. Simple and clean is the way. Did they play that in Kingdom Hearts 3? Simple and clean? No?
What's Simple and Clean from?
Bally, fucking come on, man. Like, Jesus. Only the greatest anime song of all time from Kingdom Hearts, the original. It's the only thing I like about Kingdom Hearts is simple. Well, okay, we'll listen to... Just wait until the end of the podcast. We'll listen to that Frozen song, and then we'll listen to Simple and Clean, alright?
Okay.
I need to educate you. As the resident Kingdom Hearts fan, you need educating on your history of Kingdom Hearts.
Yes.
Cool, okay.
The DLC doesn't have any new Disney worlds, does it?
I have no fucking idea. Like,
to my knowledge, it doesn't, and that is a disgrace.
The DLC is called Remind, which to me indicates it's going to be about a bunch of bullshit nonsense that was like in the past, and you're remembering it, and who knows. Fucking wait, I just don't. Simple and Clean is the only good thing about Kingdom Hearts. That's all I'll say.